Hello everyone and welcome back to LewisFiction. This is your full movie version for the Spectacular Spider-Man Season 3. If you did enjoy this season, make sure to subscribe and make sure to leave a like on this video. And also make sure to hit the bell next to the subscribe button so you can stay posted on when Season 4 releases. It will release this year in 2023, hopefully all episodes. With that out of the way, hopefully you all enjoy the movie version. So here is Spectacular Spider-Man Season 3. Episode 1. Summer Vacation. School's out and crime is down. Peter Parker hasn't had much to do as Spider-Man, which then eases us back into this series perfectly with a slow episode. Season 1 and 2 were action-packed and emotional, and we can reminisce to those with the audience. We don't need action and crime to be invested in these characters anymore. Thus, we will start Season 3 with an emotionally packed Peter Parker episode, one that reflects on the events of Behind the Curtain. Peter is lost. It's summer and he should be out there fighting crime as Spider-Man or enjoying himself with his friends. Unfortunately for Peter, he broke up with his cheerleader girlfriend Liz Allen for one of his best friends, Gwen Stacy, whilst Gwen was going to break up with her current boyfriend, Peter's other best friend, Harry Osborn, so they could be together, as that is what they truly wanted. However, due to the death of his father, Harry has been sent in a state of depression, and Gwen, out of guilt, is forced to stay with Harry at the end of Season 2. And now because of this, Gwen is spending almost every day at Harry's, with Peter being cast aside. Harry knows what Peter and Gwen were planning to do, so he uses manipulation to keep Gwen with him. He's holding on to every last hope. This episode will focus on how distant Peter is from Gwen and Harry, and on the Harry and Gwen side of things, we will focus on the beginning of the fall of Harry's character. He manipulates Gwen to stay with him, and we'll be able to see through their interactions that Gwen doesn't want to stay with him. We will catch up with the Parker household as well. Aunt May will notice that Peter is down and that he has been more home than usual lately. Peter will say it's nothing, after all he can't reveal that he's Spider-Man. That almost happened once and he'd not like it to happen again. We will also catch up with the Bugle and J. Jonah Jameson, as Jameson is furious that Spider-Man has almost dropped off the face of the earth and newspaper sales are down. Jameson says that he needs a big scoop. A big scoop. Then Ned Leeds arrives with Betty Brant from an elevator. Jameson says that they're both late for work and they better have a good reason to be. They just stand there awkwardly. We will start to see hints and inklings of Betty's and Ned's relationship start to develop. Jameson storms back into his office saying he wants a big scoop on his desk in the next 3.6 seconds or else he's gonna flip. We get a scene where Peter is swinging through the city as Spider-Man. It's a calm moment. We have a narration over the top with Peter talking about the situation and how things are, mentioning that he hasn't heard from Harry or Gwen in a while and that they seem kinda distant. He gives Harry a call and he doesn't pick up. He thinks that's odd. Then he gives Gwen a call and she doesn't pick up either. Peter thinks this is really odd, but just thinks that they're probably just busy doing a couple things. Then his spider senses go off. He jumps out of the way and it's someone throwing something at him from the streets. They start shouting that Jameson was right about him, that he's a criminal. Peter is so baffled by this. We then hard cut to a newspaper being slammed onto a table and Peter sitting at home reading it out in his head. Norman Osborn murdered by Spider-Man from the Daily Bugle. Peter's eyes widen. He didn't kill Norman Osborn. He know he didn't. Peter leans his head back. He knows this isn't good. Spider-Man was his one escape, and his life is ruined too. Spider-Man can't get a break. What if Harry finds out? How would he react? He just wishes the Bugle wouldn't print such things. Then Aunt May enters the scene. She says that Anna Watson and her niece are coming over for dinner tonight. Peter says, wait, Mary Jane is coming? And May will say yes. Peter leans his head back again, exclaiming in his head that this will be awkward after that date they had before. Why has life always got to throw him into these situations? We then cut to a scene with Montana. He has escaped prison and he enters a warehouse. A thug comes up to him with a box and says all of his stuff is in there and ready to go. Montana opens the crate to see his shocker suit inside the box. He smiles and says it's finally time for his big score. The thug says the higher-ups will want a cut as he's provided the suit. Shocker questions who are the higher-ups. The thug says that they're not to be named. Shocker jokes, asking if Tombstone is back on the block after being arrested. The thug frowns at Shocker and then smirks, and says someone more powerful than Tombstone, and someone who, given the time, will bring the city to its knees. The thug leaves and Shocker gets ready. We then cut to a scene where Peter goes into Mr. Jameson's office. JJ asks what he wants and says that he's a busy man. Peter tries to explain that Spider-Man didn't kill Norman Osborn as Peter is enraged about the new headline. And Jameson says ever since the Wallcrawler's slight absence, sales have dropped. He has to up the sales one way or another. And then Jameson goes on to say, let's be honest, he He probably did anyway. He walks over to the door and opens it up to gesture Peter to leave. Peter exclaims that Spider-Man didn't kill Osborn and that he can't print that kind of things because it's lies and it's libel. Jameson calls Peter out on being so defensive towards Spider-Man, and Peter immediately backs off to console his identity. Then Aunt May will call him to say that dinner is ready, and that MJ and Anna Watson are coming in 5 minutes. Peter says he'll be right there. Peter arrives home and swings in through his window and makes a bang when he closes it. Aunt May calls him from downstairs, asking if that's him. She is serving dinner out to the table as Anna Watson and Mary Jane sit at the table. May says that she'll go and see what it is, and MJ says no, let her go and do it, as May is serving the dinner out with hot plates in her hands. MJ goes upstairs and Peter is shouting, "May, don't come in!" MJ will say that it's her, and Peter will be surprised and will awkwardly say hi back to her through the other side of the door, as he's frantically trying to get his Spider-Man costume off. Then he tries to take his boot off and falls over. MJ asks if he's alright in there. The tension rises as she walks in and Peter is just ready in time, just enough to hide the Spider-Man costume under his clothes. MJ looks around Peter's room as a Spider-Man mask is hanging off the back of his chair. She notices it out of the corner of her eye but doesn't say anything. Peter says that he's ready and then they go downstairs to dinner. We then have a scene where they all catch up with one another. Peter and MJ will build their friendship and get to know each other a little bit more. Aunt May turns on the news to see that J. Jonah Jameson is reporting that the Shocker is once again out on the loose robbing a bank, and Captain Stacy and his team are almost on the scene. But it seems that his suit is more powerful than ever. We then get an awkward conversation where Peter stands up and suddenly stating that he has to leave. He really has to go and do something for the Bugle. He forgot to hand in some photos earlier, and if he doesn't, he'll be fired. Aunt May frantically tries to ask why so suddenly, and he says he just has to go. Peter leaves and MJ squints in his direction, suspicious of what's going on. She knows that something is up with him. We then get the big heroic scene of the episode where Spider-Man swings into battle to stop the Shocker. Spider-Man tries to battle the Shocker as he did before, but it doesn't work as the Shocker's suit and gloves are enhanced and upgraded. Spider-Man will ask the Shocker where he got his upgraded tech from, and he says he doesn't even know himself, but it'll help him take down the bug once and for all. We have a grace period where Spider-Man hides to try and think of a way to beat the Shocker. Captain Stacy then arrives on the scene with his officers. Officers run into the building. One officer sees Spider-Man hiding and shouts for him to put his hands in the air for the murder of Norman Osborn. This alerts the Shocker to where Spider-Man is, and then shoots in his direction. The shot causes a ripple effect, and the rubble is about to drop on the cop when Spider-Man swings down and takes him to safety. He lands and thinks that's it. He needs to somehow come up with a force that can crush the Shocker's gloves, since taking them from him won't be so easy. He distracts the Shocker, and Shocker shoots at him. Spider-Man moves out of the way, and to Shocker's surprise, some rubble comes falling down on him, crushing him and his gloves. Spider-Man removes the rubble as Montana is crippled. He asks where he got the tech from. Oscorp? Shocker says that he doesn't even know himself, and even if he did, he wouldn't tell him. Spider-Man swings out of the building as the cops come in. We linger on Captain Stacy as he squints, and then he smiles as he looks in Spider-Man's direction. We sort of get the feeling that the Captain doesn't really believe in all these rumors surrounding the Wallcrawler. We then get an outro scene with Spider-Man on top of a building. Peter narrates to himself the events of the episode, how he's gone a summer without Harry or Gwen, he completely stood up MJ, Aunt May and Anna Watson, and despite the Shocker takedown, the city and Jameson still thinks he murdered Norman Osborn. However, Peter will say that he senses something fishy on the horizon. After what happened with Shocker, something big is coming, and it's coming fast. Episode 2, Cheetahs Never Prosper. The first scene will be the Oscorp Industries event. Donald Mencken will come up on stage and will reveal to us that he is the new acting CEO of Oscorp after Norman's passing. He says that he believes Norman would have trusted him wholeheartedly to run this company, and he reckons he can do a great job of it. He then reveals that his first plans are to open a local shopping franchise around New York called Osmart, which will sell a range of products and allow Oscorp to become more accessible to the everyman while still continuing the bigger projects like Norman did. He then says thank you and leaves the stage. We cut to the next school year. The first episode was us being drawn back into the series, and this episode will time skip straight before the next school year. This season really starts a new chapter in the show's run, thus why we are starting a brand new school year. Plus the time jump from season 2 to 3 really allows some breathing room and the dust to settle from the end of that season and the events of Behind the Curtain. We start our episode with an opening narration from Peter Parker, once again recapping the events of the previous episode and how everything is kind of messing up in his life right now. This city hates Spider-Man, he messed up his relationship with Liz, which we can see he regrets slightly, and worst of all, he's been aired by his best friend Harry, and Gwen has been with Harry all summer keeping him company after his father's death. We see Peter walk back into school and sits by himself. Professor Warren welcomes everyone back after a long summer, and we pan around the classroom to see old faces. We see Flash, Randy, Gwen, Liz, Sally, MJ, Hobie, and Kenny, and Harry comes in last and sits down. Peter tries to gesture to him by raising his hand, but Harry doesn't see him and just sits down. Peter frowns and just puts his head on the desk. Professor Warren tells everyone to turn their brand new books to chapter 1 for the new semester. Then someone enters the room and calls Harry's name. They say for him to come with them. Harry goes with them. He's taken to the headmaster's office. They say that Harry is expelled from school for an entire semester for using globulin green to enhance his performance on the pitch. They said they found out about how he was under the influence. The trophy that they won last season has been returned till the end of this season. The entire team also get a points deduction for the upcoming season as well. They say they are very disappointed in Harry. However, Harry snaps. He says, "Do you not know what he's been going through?" The headmaster says that he understands with his father's death and everything, but then Harry interrupts saying no. Harry says he has to sympathize with him more and then bursts out of the door just as Peter is in the hallway. Harry storms down the corridor. Peter shouts his name, but he carries on walking. Peter says he's really in a tight spot and he should check in on him sometime. Not a call, but in person. We then get a slow scene with Spider-Man. We cut to after school and Peter is on top of a building reflecting, wishing that the city would just understand. Spider-Man doesn't kill people. He's never killed people and never would. It's like one bad thing happens and they all ignore all the good things he's done. Peter starts to think of solutions, ways he could win the people back over. He says he could sell balloons or t-shirts. Nah, he can't do that. Peter looks at his phone as he gets a report of crime going down near him. He goes and checks it out. However, when he arrives on the scene, the robber has already got away. It's one of the new Osmarts that has been robbed. Spidey looks inside and it doesn't appear that anything was taken, but rather destroyed. Shelves, tables, products, even the expensive stuff has been destroyed. The cops arrive shortly after and instantly point their guns at Spider-Man, telling him to put his hands in the air. Peter breathes a sigh of disappointment as he swings away. But as he swings, he thinks about how the convict got away so fast. But who did it? And why destroy an Osmart and not take anything? If it happens again, he'll be extra sharp. We then cut to Aunt May. Peter comes through the door just in time for dinner. He sits down at the table and they catch up. May asks about his day and says it was pretty average. Then Aunt May will tell Peter that she's got a job working at the feast shelter downtown. Peter says that's great. She says that it's so he doesn't always have to give her a cut of the money he gets from the Bugle, as he needs to start saving up for college soon. Peter will also mention that how she needs to be careful after the heart attack she had not too long ago. May says that she knows and generally blows it off as nothing. Peter will ask what feast is about anyway, and Aunt May will tell him that it was designed to give a home to those people who lost property to the destruction of the Spider-Man and Goblin fight. Peter can see Aunt May is affected by this, as she shows some kind of deep sorrow for those who unfortunately lost homes, money, and even lives. This takes Peter back a bit. He's been so infuriated that the city hate him for the death of Norman Osborn. Maybe he didn't kill him, but maybe they still have a reason to be unhappy with him. Peter starts to realize now that all these big battles may have an effect on the everyman and woman living in a normal home. That fight with the Goblin cost New York millions of dollars, and now he's only realizing it. This creates a conflict within Peter. This is the start of the reflection on that City Spider-Man storyline set up in the first episode, with the death of Norman being blamed on him. He starts to bounce back and learn. We then cut to Harry as he arrives home. He walks into his father's office and in his anger, he shoves and pushes all things off the table. Then all of a sudden through the doors walks Donald Mencken. Harry doesn't seem pleased to see him as he shouts in his direction. This scene will show how Harry isn't pleased about Mencken's new approval as the new CEO of Oscorp. Harry says that he already had a bad day and to leave him alone and to get out of his house. Mencken says that his house is also partly owned by Oscorp, so technically it's his house too. Harry says he'll ruin his family's legacy and that Oscorp does not belong to him. Mencken says that he has the power now. Mencken walks off arrogantly and Harry breaks down on his knees and tears start to stream from his eyes. The next day we will have a scene with the football team and Flash Thompson. The start of the season will come up soon and Flash is preparing the football team. He says that this season they're going to win, but this time they're going to win legitimately. They don't need Osborn. They can win it fair and square. This will be the start of Flash's character arc for this season. Usually he'd be all immature, but after Harry being on the green, Flash has become a better person and more determined footballer to go out and win. This year, he's determined that they will win. We then cut to Jameson, who is reporting on the mystery robber. He says to Robbie that this is a big scoop and that he bets it has something to do with the wall-crawling weasel. After all, he's been involved in a lot of shady business lately with Osborn and everything, so it wouldn't surprise him if he was trying to destroy his legacy too. Robbie exclaims to JJ that Spider-Man didn't kill Norman Osborn, that's just not in character for the web-slinger. Jonah grits his teeth and asks if Parker was on the scene. We then cut to Peter, who gets a call from Jameson asking him if he got any pictures from last night. Peter says no because nothing happened. The robber dipped faster than he could get there. Jameson puts the phone down in anger. But then as Peter carries on walking down the street, cop cars rush past. We cut to Captain Stacy in the cop car, who says our mystery man has been spotted destroying another Osmart. Peter raises his eyebrows. We hard cut to Spider-Man running on a wall when his phone rings. Peter says, this isn't the time. He sees that Gwen is calling him. His eyes widen. He hasn't spoken to Gwen for the longest time because of the Harry situation. Everything always has to happen at the most inconvenient time. Peter picks up the phone and shouts down the phone that he's glad she called, but he can't talk right now. And Gwen says okay and puts the phone down. Spider-Man chases the cop cars who arrive at the scene. Spider-Man keeps his distance as the cops aren't really on his side right now. Then a smoke bomb goes off and it's released and all of the cops, including Captain Stacy, drop to the floor unconscious. Spider-Man drops down and lands just outside the Osmart. He then exclaims that Spider-Man is there and that they have been caught, so they might as well hand themselves in. And then out of nowhere, as the smoke clears, a cat-like creature pounces out, kicking Spider-Man in the face. His spider sense is too slow to react. Spidey goes flying back and then gets up remarking, "What is that?" He then looks up as he sees a man dressed in a cat costume. Spider-Man instantly makes a joke saying, "What are you meant to be, some kind of black cat ripoff? The ginger cat?" Then the man replies saying that his name is Puma. Puma and Spider-Man fight each other. The agility and speed of Puma is what strikes Spider-Man the most, as he's finding it hard to keep up with him. Spidey in this fight scene will have to find a way to take the unconscious police officers to a safe location, which will be the obstacle in his way whilst fighting Puma. Eventually he'll place all the cops safely down somewhere and find a way to beat Puma. Captain Stacy will wake up and Puma will be all webbed up. Once again Captain Stacy smiles and says he's done it again. Once again showcasing that the Captain doesn't really believe all the rumours about Spider-Man. We cut to a thug who is on the phone to someone. The thug says that Puma was sent to prison as he throws a newspaper with the headline on it in the trash. The man on the phone says that if his plans are to be completed, he needs the Spider-Man to stop interfering in their work. The thug asks what their next move is. The man on the phone says they need to eliminate Spider-Man. He's too much of a threat to their plans. Oscorp will fall into their hands slowly but surely, and then the city will crumble under his power. We then cut back to Peter, who is on top of a building with his mask off. He goes onto his phone and calls Gwen. It rings for a while until it just calls out. Peter sighs in disappointment, but acts as if he wasn't surprised. He blew it. That was the only time Gwen could have called him, and he couldn't talk. Peter says that he gets Harry's going through a lot and stuff, but he hasn't been able to see him or her for the longest time. He says he'll have to try and find Gwen at school and talk to her in person, because this whole situation is getting a bit out of hand. Episode 3. Health and Safety. We start our episode with Peter out late as Spider-Man. He returns home and crawls through the window trying not to make too much noise to alert Aunt May. He's hoping that she fell asleep, as if she didn't, she'd be on his case about how late it is. Peter gets changed and goes to check on Aunt May. He can't find her downstairs, in a bedroom, or anywhere. Peter starts to freak out, however notices that his spider sense isn't going off, alerting him that nothing bad has happened or is happening. He was just about to call Anna Watson, Mary Jane's aunt, and May's best friend before Aunt May opens the front door and walks through looking tired and worn out. Peter goes and hugs her, exclaiming that he thought something bad had happened, asking, "How is she in so late?" Aunt May says that they changed her shift so that she's working later today at Feast. Peter says that he was worried and says that they need to put her on the earlier shifts because she had a heart attack not too long ago and she needs to be careful. Aunt May says that she's fine and asks Peter if he wants anything to eat because she's a bit peckish. Peter jokes around saying that maybe she's the one who needs a curfew out of the two of them. After this sweet moment, we switch around and are introduced to Matt Gargan. He enters a room with a sinister voice talking to him. We can't see the figure, however he tells Mac that he can get revenge on Spider-Man. We then get a flashback scene explaining Mac's past. Mac's family died in a fire in his apartment during the Goblin Spider-Man fight. The Goblin threw a bomb at the apartment, setting it alight, his family not making it out in time. Spider-Man had time to fight the Goblin, but not enough time to save his family, and he wants to show Spider-Man is a fraud. So now he has gone to see someone known as the new Big Man, or that's the name he goes by his associates, whose ideals align with Mac. He also wants Spider-Man dead too, after him screwing up his plans in the last episode. The new Big Man says that he can make Mac powerful and strong with some new technology that him and his associates have built. Mac gets into a machine and the man turns it on, and the Scorpion is born using genetic recombination to give him the super strength of a scorpion. We cut to a scene of Peter swinging from the top of the Daily Bugle, narrating to himself the whole Harry and Gwen situation again, saying that he'd give Gwen a call, but he thinks it's best to talk about what's been happening in real life rather than over the phone. He needs a real conversation and a real talk. He then enters the Bugle to hand photos into Jameson from the Spider-Man and Puma fight earlier in the week. Jameson takes the photos off him, and on the way out he bumps into Liz Allen, who has gotten a part-time job as a writer at the Daily Bugle. This interaction is awkward, and Peter and Liz cowardly say hi to one another. However, Liz still seems miffed off with Peter after the whole breakup situation. Liz used her skills that Peter taught her in English to get a job. This goes on for a little longer until no other than the Scorpion attacks the Daily Bugle. He asks JJ who is the one that takes the photos of Spider-Man and how can he find him. And Jameson replies with, "You're not the first bozo who is coming here asking that question." Spider-Man then quickly appears on the scene as Peter was already there, and they fight. Spider-Man makes some witty remarks about what's the fascination with his villains and animals. Did they get inspired by the spider look, or is it just plain coincidence? The Scorpion starts getting really annoyed and says to Spider-Man that he ruined his life. Spider-Man jokes back saying that he's never met him. They fight for a little longer. Peter is trying his hardest to get the Scorpion away from the Daily Bugle so no one gets hurt. Then all of a sudden the Scorpion's power starts to diminish and he escapes. Spider-Man is confused at first at what just happened. Weird things keep happening around the city that makes Peter more aware that maybe something is coming. We then get a scene the next day where Captain Stacy is running another class at Midtown High on health and safety. He's teaching them to always stay out of harm's way of the police and not to run into dangerous situations. He teaches them what to do in situations if they find themselves caught up in the middle of an ongoing crime, or who to call and what to do. The class ends and Peter leaves and he sees Gwen. He looks for Harry too, but he's nowhere to be seen. Peter tries to shout her, but she runs off outside. It looks like she could be late for something, so he'll have to catch up with her when he sees her again. Peter visits the Daily Bugle the next day to see it wrecked. Jameson is on the phone with lawyers going mad. He gets off the phone and says that this place still needs to run a newspaper. He puts Peter and Liz, of all people, on the same case to uncover the mysteries behind the Scorpion, telling them to make it a top priority and a big story. Liz will write it and Peter will take the pics. He tells both of them to get out and let him sort this mess out before he flips anymore, and the vein in the top of his head pops. They leave and then have another awkward interaction, and it's a bit of a jagged conversation. But Liz says that they should keep this strictly professional to work and not let their personal lives interfere with this if JJ wants a top priority story. Peter agrees and they do their research on the Scorpion to start the story and possibly find out where he could be or who he could be, but they can't find anything. They both say to each other that they'll come back to it later, but will contact each other if anything comes up. We then get a scene with Spider-Man narrating as he swings around the city. Peter saying to himself how awkward it is that he's working with his ex-girlfriend. The Parker look strikes again. What is he to do? What can he do? All these situations are all clouding Peter's mind. The Gwen and Harry stuff, something seems to be going down in New York, something big is coming, and now he has to work with his ex-girlfriend? What more could go wrong? We then cut to a scene where Matt comes into the Big Man for some more induced radiation. This time, he says he wants more, so he can be bigger, stronger, and more powerful than before. This time, he wants to kill Spider-Man for what he's done. This falls right into the Big Man's hands as well, as he laughs as he switches on the machine. We then cut back to Peter in school. This is a slower scene as he's just finished math class and he sees Gwen in the hallway. He shouts her name and she turns around. He says that he's been meaning to talk to her for some time, but she seems very on edge and a bit down. He says that he wants to talk to her about what happened this summer and why Harry has been avoiding him, and speaking of which, where the hell is Harry? But before Gwen can open her mouth, Peter gets a call from Liz. He picks up and Liz says that he's got to get down here now. The Scorpion is on the loose again. Peter says that that was Liz and he's got to go. Gwen says, Liz? And is really confused. Peter says not like that, as if she took it the wrong way, insinuating that they were getting back together. He leaves the school, leaving Gwen baffled. She is shocked, but then puts a stern face of annoyance on, which creaks into a face of sadness. What could be going wrong with her and Harry? We'll have to find out. Peter meets up with Liz, and apparently the Scorpion is holding hostages in a building downtown. Peter exclaims, hostages? Peter knows that this is a job for Spider-Man. However, he can't just ditch Liz and use the excuse that he needs photos for the Bugle like he always used to, when that's literally where he's going now. He's going to have to ride this one as Peter Parker and hope that he can find a way to slip into the costume. Liz also says that she found something on who the Scorpion actually is. After doing some digging, apparently his name is Matt Gargan, from what the photos of his face lined up with facial recognition. Apparently, his family died on the night that Spider-Man fought the Goblin in a fire, and Liz believes that he wants revenge on Spider-Man because he never saved his family. Liz says that it's sad and that there's always two sides to a coin. You never know when someone's actually doing something until you actually know their backstory. Some people aren't all evil, and Peter is shocked. His eyes widen. He now realizes what's going on with the Scorpion, why he said that he ruined his life. It's because his family actually did die in that fire of the Goblin Spider-Man fight. Peter once again realizing the effects Spider-Man is having on other people's lives, not just himself. Life lost because of him. It plays on his mind as they approach the building. They manage to sneak inside. Peter says to Liz that this probably isn't a good idea, reminding her of what Captain Stacy taught in the lesson yesterday. Liz says that they need a good look at him for the description, and Peter needs a clear picture as well for the Daily Bugle. They make their way to the room and hide behind some boxes, but as Liz is writing, she drops her pen, and it makes a noise loud enough that the Scorpion hears them. Max says that they're gonna have more guests and ties them both up with the other hostages. Scorpion says that he's gonna start killing them one by one if Spider-Man doesn't show his face. He wants to show Spider-Man how many innocent lives are damaged by his very existence. He knows what he's doing is wrong, but he's lost everything and now just wants to prove a point to the person he blames for his family's death. Peter is in a tough spot. How does he get out of this? But before he can think any longer, Captain Stacy sneaks up the stairs and busts down the door and pulls out his gun. But before he can shoot, the Scorpion spots this and whacks his tail towards him, knocking the Captain back, but also knocking some of the pillars holding up the ceiling as well. The ceiling above Liz and someone else starts to come crumbling down. Peter doesn't have a choice and pushes both of them out of the way, with the rubble landing on him instead. Liz's eyes widen, shouting his name in desperation. She scrambles through the rubble as the Scorpion looms over her, saying that that is one down. Then all of a sudden, Spider-Man comes out of nowhere, kicking the Scorpion in the face. Spider-Man and the Scorpion have an intense fight. Captain Stacy takes this opportunity, although injured, to get people out of the building while Spider-Man distracts the Scorpion. They come to a standstill and the Scorpion carries on explaining that he is the reason that his family is dead. Peter feels terrible about this fact and says that he's sorry he couldn't save his family. But this is not the way to go about this. Spider-Man, instead of fighting him, prolongs the fight instead, until Scorpion's energy runs out. Scorpion tries to escape again, but Spider-Man says not this time and webs him down. He says that he's already caused too much destruction, and threatened to kill someone as well. He starts questioning Scorpion, asking where he got his powers from, and Mac tells him nothing. Scorpion is taken away by the police. Liz is outside the building, telling George that Peter is trapped under the rubble. You have to save him. But then an injured Peter Parker makes his way from the building, faking a limp. Liz runs up and hugs him, as medical staff start to surround everyone. Captain Stacy says that it was brave what he did back there, but they need to be more careful and aware of what situations they're putting themselves in, for their safety. On their way out, Captain Stacy winks at Peter, as if he knows something's going on that's a little bit fishy. Peter's eyes widen, but just plays it off. We cut to the Daily Bugle. Liz hands Jameson the story, and he's impressed, and Peter hands Jameson the photos, and says that it's his usual stick, but it's not bad. Peter and Liz both leave JJ's office as repairs continue to go on at the Daily Bugle. Peter asks if he can talk about what happened. He says that it's been lingering on his mind this entire time, and if they're gonna start working in the same place, he needs to get it off his chest. Liz says go on, and Peter says that he's sorry for doing what he did. he didn't consider her feelings and that he's really, really sorry. He asks if they can be friends. Liz says that she loved Peter, and she still does. He hurt her, and she says that she won't be played like that again. So no, they can't be friends, she says. She says it'll hurt too much, and if she has to work with him, so be it, but that doesn't mean she has to be friends with him. She says they can be acquaintances. They'll see each other, they'll work together, but that's it. Liz walks off as Peter is shocked. He really hurt that girl, and there's nothing he can do about it. We cut to the big man. He says his plans are slowly being shifted to account for the destruction of Spider-Man, and he will find a way to conquer New York, one way or another. We cut to a scene of Peter approaching Gwen's house. We get a closing narration as he walks up. He says that he blew it with Liz, and maybe Jameson and the city are right. First feast to help the homeless after the Spidey Goblin fight, and now someone's family straight up dead because of the destruction? He just thought people were onto him for no reason, but he sees why now. But this isn't the time. Now is the time to focus on my Peter Parker problem, one that he's neglected for a while. He builds himself up but says he desperately needs to talk. He knocks on the door and Captain Stacy answers. He says, "Peter, what are you doing here?" And he says that he's here to see Gwen. Gwen comes to the door and Peter apologizes for leaving so soon before. She looked off. Is everything okay? Gwen says that it's fine, she knows he's a busy person. She comes outside and closes the door as if she doesn't want her dad to hear. She looks around to see no one's there. She then says that it's Harry, and Peter looks concerned. What about Harry? She says that he's missing, and he has been for the last couple of days. Episode 4. Lost and Found. We start our episode where the last one left off. Peter is stood outside Gwen's house after Gwen has just told him that Harry is missing. Peter doesn't know what to say. He's shocked. Peter says, "Missing?" Peter says that they have to find him. He has to be reported to the police. Gwen says that her dad doesn't know and that she doesn't want him to know. Peter asks why, and Gwen says because she fears the worst. What if he's gotten into some kind of trouble, and by law, her dad has to arrest him, or worse? Peter asks if she's saying what he thinks she's saying, and Gwen says yeah. She thinks he could be back on the green again, and Peter says that there isn't a chance. He said he'd never touch that stuff ever again. Peter says to keep it between them two, and then they'll start their search tomorrow by visiting Emily Osborn, Harry's mother. We cut to Peter on top of a building in the Spider-Man costume that night. He squints his eyes out onto the city, and he says to himself, how can he rest when he knows his best friend is out there, somewhere? Harry Osborn lies. He can't be far. He says he better get back to Aunt May before she starts to worry again. Peter returns home and we have a slow scene with Aunt May. Peter looks stressed and he just chalks it up to being tired. Aunt May says that he's always out too late and never gets any sleep anymore. He needs to rest, and Peter thinks to himself that he wish he could too. We cut to a scene with the big man and someone else who is in the shadows. The big man says that he used most of his resources trying to catch Spider-Man. That pest has been in his way for the very last time. This is the final straw, and out of the shadows comes the Prowler, saying that he'll make sure he gets the job done. The big man says that he's never let him down and he expects him not to do this time either. We then cut to the next day and Peter and Gwen are in school. A janitor comes into the classroom saying that a sweater has been handed into the Lost and Found and it's name tagged to Harry. The janitor asks if Harry is there. Everyone looks around to notice no Harry Osborn. Gwen steps up and says that she's his girlfriend and she will give it to him. The janitor leaves. After class, Professor Warren says that he wants a word with Gwen and Peter. He says he knows that Gwen and Peter are close with Harry and he asks where he has been. The professor assumed that he'd been unwell since not attending the last few days, but after no call from his mother or anyone, he started to become a bit worried. Gwen says that it's nothing to worry about and she has to lie and say that he's just a bit ill at the moment and he'll be back in school soon because obviously he is missing and Gwen and Peter don't really know what's happened. Peter and Gwen leave the class. We then cut to a scene with Peter and Gwen walking up to Harry's house. They beg and hope that Emily knows something about where he is. They knock on the door and Emily answers. They explain the situation to Harry's mother and she says that that's weird because she hasn't seen him in ages either. She assumed that he was with Gwen at her house and was just about to contact her to see if she'd seen him. Peter and Gwen are lost. Emily says the last time that she saw him was a couple of days ago, which lines up exactly where Peter and Gwen last saw him as well. Peter and Gwen leave and they say that they will let Emily know if they find anything. Peter says to Gwen that they just need to tell her dad or the police or someone. Gwen says that they can't because they don't know what's actually happened to him and they don't want to get their friend in trouble. Peter says that he thinks that's best. Gwen says that he can't comment on what he thinks is best when he hasn't been there when she's needed him the most. Peter is shocked. Why did she say that? Gwen says that he never answers her calls and ignores her all the time. It's like he's got something against her. Peter says, whoa, calm down. Peter hits back with saying that her and Harry have both ignored Peter all summer. What the hell was he meant to do? And Gwen says that she's sorry, she just snapped. She's just really stressed about Harry. In fact, Peter has no idea why them two have been so distant with him, but he tells Gwen that he thinks it's something to do with Harry. And Gwen finally comes to her senses and didn't really want to admit it, but yeah, she was in the wrong, and she sighs, and she says it is something to do with Harry. She tells Peter that Harry overheard them talking about breaking up with him and Liz so that they could be together. Peter gulps. Gwen says that after Norman died and with everything that has happened to him, he's been a ticking time bomb ever since, waiting to go off. She didn't want Peter to know, and Harry wasn't fond of him either at the time, so they spent the summer apart. Peter is shocked. He doesn't know what to say. He feels so bad for Harry and guilty, but at the same time, he feels as if they should have tried to resolve it because Harry might not have been missing in that case. Peter says let's not dwell on it though over what should have or what could have happened. The main thing right now is that they need to find Harry. He already messed up with Liz. He doesn't want to lose another person that is so close to him. He needs to find Harry and resolve this. He needs to resolve the whole situation with him and Gwen, why they've been ignoring him over the summer and everything. Gwen then gets a call from Emily Osborne saying that she has had a call from Professor Warren at school. Emily delivers the sad news that apparently they have found Green in Harry's locker again. She says that he's back on it by all the signs. Gwen says maybe wherever he got it from they can track back and then find out where he might be. Gwen starts to walk away as cop cars stream past them on the street. Peter looks around and knows that he's going to have to intervene. This looks like a big deal. Peter says that he needs to go and says that he'll catch up with her later. He says the Bugle will want photos and Gwen pulls a stern face of annoyance, stating that that's his friend, he's in trouble, and he's just going to leave? Peter says he's sorry and he runs off, he really needs to go. Peter pulls down the mask in an alleyway and says, why does it always have to be at the most inconvenient of times? He swings towards the scene of the accident. Captain Stacy is there as well. A cloud of smoke appears from the distance and Spidey says that that can't be good. He arrives at the scene and out of a cloud of smoke appears the Prowler. The police try to disarm him, but the Prowler overpowers them and throws one of the officers back to the road. Spidey catches him and places him down safely. The officer looks up at Spidey and says, you know what, you might not be so bad after all. Spidey squints in annoyance and looks back up to the Prowler. Prowler says that he knew that smoke cloud would get his attention. Spidey asks what he wants and who is he? Prowler introduces himself and says that he wants him. Spidey asks, why does everyone want me lately? It's like Pass the Parcel, Villains Edition. They engage in a battle. The Prowler already seems a formidable foe, one he hasn't quite experienced yet. His moves, quick and sharp, they remind him of the Goblin somewhat, as the thought of Harry looms over his head. Spidey gets the upper hand slightly as the cops assist the escape of surrounding civilians. However, the Prowler is too strong and gets Spidey down on the floor. Spider-Man, injured, tries to ask the Prowler what he wants one more time. The Prowler steps on his chest, making it hard for him to speak. He says someone wants to see you for all the mess you've made. Spidey is confused when Prowler sprays Spidey with some knockout gas. Spidey flips back and fights off the Prowler's grip. However, it's too late. He consumed too much of it and his eyes start to go wobbly. And then Prowler delivers the final blow, knocking Spidey to the floor. Prowler escapes into the night, with Spider-Man captured. We cut to a dark room with light shining over Spider-Man. He wakes up and groans. His hands are tied with a special material, and so are his feet. He tries to stretch and break it, but he can't. Then a voice can be heard saying that that won't work. It's made from a special metal known as adamantium. Those shackles won't budge anytime soon. The man says, we finally meet at last. Spidey says, yeah, we do. And who is this new big man? He will say mockingly. The big man reveals himself from the shadows and says his name is Wilson Fisk, but you can call him the Kingpin. The Kingpin? Says Spider-Man as he thought Tombstone was enough, but now this? He asks him what he wants with him, and Fisk says that he's been dabbling in his plans for the last time. He's been orchestrating behind the scenes for a while. He explains how he made his way up the ladder in the criminal underworld from rags to riches, and how he plans to go for his biggest score yet, to take over the biggest company in New York, Oscorp Industries, and then bring New York to its knees and under his control, with every street corner, every gang, every heist, every job at his fingertips. He says he'll be unstoppable. But first he has to sort out the man that is getting in his way. Spider-Man. He credits Spider-Man, saying that he's never faced a much determined opponent in his life. However, the Kingpin always wins. Spidey says, great, another villain that's narcissistic enough to talk about themselves in the third person. Spider-Man still has his mask on. He's confused. He asks Fisk, why didn't he take it off? Most villains would revel in the chance to find out who Spider-Man is and his identity. Fisk says he doesn't need to know who is under the mask to kill the man who wears it. To him, he's just another pawn trying to stop him. But Fisk says he wants a fair fight. If he really wants to stop him, he is to do it like a man. The shackles release and Spider-Man is set free. Fisk rolls his sleeves up and says he's done playing games. It's time to see who the victor of this clash will really be. They engage in battle, and Spidey has never faced someone with the sheer strength as Kingpin. He is fearless and reminds him a lot of Tombstone. Strong, heavy, fast, and ruthless. Kingpin batters Spidey around like a ragdoll. Spidey tries to fight him off, but he can't. Spidey is allowed one moment to be free of Fisk's grasp and uses it to escape. The Prowler edges forward, looking like he's about to go after him, but Fisk says to leave it. He will have him under his grasp again very soon. He escaped, and Spidey lands on top of a building and coughs up blood, his suit ripped and bloodied. Spidey barely escaped there with his life. He's never backed down from a fight, but this time he had to. We then have a slow scene where Peter crawls through his bedroom window. This scene is here right after the big Kingpin fight to remind us that this is just still a boy in a costume. He fights these big battles but still comes home to his bedroom at his aunt's house. Peter takes off the costume and puts some clothes on. Aunt May comes upstairs and shouts him, asking if that's him. Peter says yeah it is. May comes in and sees Peter's face with a black eye. She asks what happened and Peter says that he's fine. He just tripped over and face palmed on a pole. May says she's sorry for not being home as often to look after him because she's always down at the feast center. May says that she's in a better place now as well. She isn't making a lot of money, but it's at least enough to cover the bills just about. However, they're not completely out of the dumps yet. Peter says that he's glad there is at least some hope. May says that he should come down for dinner at Feast one time and meet her boss, Martin Lee. He's a really great guy, and Peter says yeah, that would be great. He'd love to. Aunt May says get some rest and leaves Peter. Peter reflects on the situation. Harry is back on the green by the looks of things, and the criminal underworld is in a worse state than ever. He feels a battle is coming. A war, in fact. It's going to be his toughest fight. Spider-Man has to regroup, reform, and fight this fight head on. New York is under threat, and there's only one man who can stop it. Episode 5. Band Practice. We start our episode in Oscorp Tower. Donald Mencken stares out of the window on a stormy night. Lightning strikes in front of him and we flash back to a memory of Mencken's. We see his family, we see his wife and his child. He seems happy and everything seems normal. After this flashback, we flash back forward to present day with another flash of lightning. Donald holds his head up, but he can't muster a smile. He then walks down to the ground floor and says goodbye to the receptionist. He walks out of the front door and gets in his limo. He says to the driver just to go straight home, until they wind down the window to reveal Wilson Fisk in the car with him. Donald is shocked by this, and Fisk says it's useless to call security as he tries to open the door. Mencken says, "What do you want, Fisk?" establishing an already set relationship between the two of them. They look at each other for a second before Donald speaks. He says he'll never forgive Fisk for what he did to him. We can see that Mencken is genuinely upset and angry at Fisk, as if he's had a never-ending grudge for the man. Fisk says that he was the one that stabbed him in the back, and now he's finally going to get revenge. Donald says that it was you who destroyed the Osmarts, and Fisk smiles and says Oscorp will be mine slowly and surely, and Mencken will be thrown out. Fisk says this is a warning and to be ready for what's coming. He doesn't want to fight unannounced. This scene will showcase Kingpin's confidence, but ultimately his honor as well. He will take what he wants, but he'll do it by showing who the bigger man is. Fisk unlocks the car and lets Donald out. He drives off, and Mencken is stood outside in the rain with a face of anger as he looks into the direction as the car pulls away. We cut to Spider-Man on top of a building looking out into the city. It's a peaceful morning in New York. Peter narrates the events of the past few episodes, recapping us on what has happened. He talks of Harry and Gwen and how the Kingpin is ready to start a full-on war on New York. The city still hate on Spider-Man after the whole Spidey killed Norman storyline. Spidey has to redeem himself and to show the world that he's not who the Bugles say he is. Peter thinks to himself that it'd be nice for the city not to hate him, but as long as he keeps doing the right thing, the city will eventually come around. Spider-Man swings through the city and lands outside of school and goes in as Peter Parker. Peter walks through the hall and there are flyers going around for auditions to join the school band. As he walks through the crowd of people, we get a shot of Liz Allen picking one of them up and reading about it. We can see that she has really distanced herself from her old group of friends. She's evolving as a character and wanting to try new things. Gwen then bumps into Peter in the hallway and everything seems normal. Peter says that he's sorry for ditching and Gwen says it's fine. She understands he has a job to do. She tells Peter that Harry has officially been made a missing persons case since he hasn't been in school and everyone that they've asked hasn't seen him as well. And since the green was found in his locker, the police are getting involved now anyway. Gwen says that the professionals are handling it now and that's probably for the best. Peter thinks to himself in his head that that's not true all the time as we get a shot where the mask fades over the other side of his face. Gwen also says that they need to get their minds off everything that has happened and act like normal teens again. So asks Peter if he wants to go and do band practice with her and Peter is surprised, stating that he's never played an instrument before in his entire life. And Gwen says that she knows but she signed him up anyway. Peter cringes for a second but Gwen says that it'll be fun. Peter says that she never played an instrument either and Gwen says that she played the flute when she was a kid for a couple of years but she'd probably be really rough now. Peter says fine then and they both head off into class. We cut to a scene with Kingpin. Kingpin says that he has developed a new plan to take Oscorp under his control and an unexpected force has arrived into his fingertips. The Prowler asks Kingpin how can he be of use to his new plan and the Kingpin just simply tells him, keep the webhead busy. We get a sinister smile from the Kingpin as we cut back to the school and after class. Peter is walking down the hallway and he's on the phone to Aunt May. He tells her that he's going to band practice and Gwen signed him up. May's surprised and says that you don't even play an instrument and never have. And Peter says that he knows and that's what he told Gwen. Peter then puts down the phone and goes into the auditions with Gwen. We get a montage of them two having fun trying to figure out the different instruments. Peter is good at nothing while Gwen seems to be good at everything. Peter feels so useless but it's clear that they're having fun just being together. This scene will really showcase how close they are getting with one another and how much they really care about each other as well. As we know, them two still have a romantic attraction to one another and this was showcased all the way back in season 1. Gwen really likes Peter and Peter really likes Gwen, but due to other circumstances they have never been able to get together. However, this scene will really show their chemistry together. We cut to the end of the montage and they both bump into Liz Allen, and it's really awkward. They all say hi to each other and Peter asks Liz what she's doing here. And Liz tells Peter that she wanted to try something new, and Peter says the same, and then he backtracks saying, well no, Gwen wanted him to, and it gets really awkward. Liz says, oh, that's cool, and they say bye to each other, and then Gwen says that that was really awkward. Peter agrees, and then Gwen says that she thought their first interaction with her would have been more sour than that, and then Peter says that they have already spoke together as she works at the Bugle now as a writer. Gwen is shocked, and Peter says that they technically sorted everything, but they didn't at the same time. We cut to them walking home. We get a scene where Gwen and Peter go to the bus stop, and Gwen gets on a bus to go home. Gwen says that she had fun, and Peter says that he did as well. They share a moment together where they just look at each other before the bus doors close, and the bus leaves. He waits for the bus to turn the corner and out of sight. And then as soon as it does, Peter turns around and determinedly runs into an alleyway and changes into his costume and swings to the top of the building. Peter says to himself that now he has to get started on trying to track down Fisk. But how? Where is he? How can he stop such power as the Kingpin? Tombstone was enough, but this is on another level. Spider-Man swings around the city for a bit, thinking to himself about what to do. We then cut to a thermal camera from above, and then it's revealed that it's the Prowler stalking Spider-Man, following him. Spidey lands on the side of a building, thinking to himself, when he's wrapped up in a rope and pulled to the top of the building. Confused and wondering what is going on, Spidey tries to break out of the rope but can't. He stands up to his feet to see the Prowler stood in front of him. Spidey says, "You back from round 2, are we?" The Prowler doesn't say anything and starts to approach Spider-Man. With a lot of force, Peter breaks free of the rope and flips over the charging Prowler. However, the Prowler grabs Peter by the foot and swings him around and throws him off the building. Peter webs to the side of the building and swings back up, kicking Prowler in the stomach, sending him flying over the building, falling to the other side. Prowler attaches his claws to the side of the building as he slows himself down. He activates a button on the side of his arm and starts to stick to the wall. Peter flips over the building and lands. They face each other on the building. Peter says, "Hey, walking on walls is his thing." Prowler throws a smoke bomb at Spider-Man. Peter starts coughing and then gets rugby tackled up against the building, breaking through the glass and into an office. Everyone inside the building gasps and starts to run as they fight each other in the office. Spider-Man uses desks and chairs to defend himself while the Prowler attacks Spider-Man relentlessly. They come to a standstill, and both suits are damaged. The Prowler's energy pack on his back starts sparking. He notices this and then runs away. Peter regroups with himself and stands up as he collects himself. He notices a piece of the Prowler's suit came off on the floor. He picks it up and turns it over, and on the inside, it says, property of Alchemax Industries on it. Peter is confused by this, but he also knows that there finally is a way to track down Fisk. He finally has a lead. We cut to the Kingpin, talking to someone. Kingpin says, "You are the perfect man for the job at hand." The camera pans round as a chuckle can be heard, revealing none other than the Green Goblin. The Goblin laughs and says, "Oh, gladly." He'll wipe Oscorp right from under Menken's feet, and then laughs like a maniac as the episode draws to a close. Episode 6, Missing in Action. We start this episode with a montage of interviews like the start of the Identity Crisis episode from Season 2. However, this time is for the disappearance of Harry Osborn. Jean DeWolf is interviewing. The first person to be interviewed is Harry's mother, Emily. She breaks down into tears, stating that she has no idea where Harry is and where he has gone. She says that she thinks it has something to do with the death of Norman, and that's why he's back on the green again. The next person to be interviewed is Gwen. She says that she doesn't know either, and Jean says that she's reportedly the last person to have seen Harry, and Gwen says probably, but that doesn't mean she knows where he is. DeWolf questions if Gwen could be protecting him since he's on the green, so he doesn't get into trouble, and Gwen says no, she'd want him to get help. Next up is Aunt May. She says that her nephew Peter is best friends with Harry, and that he would know. We cut to Peter's interview, however, Peter doesn't show up, and we're stuck with a shot of an empty chair. Jean is asking if anyone behind the camera knows where Peter is, and no one says they do. This transitions us into what Peter is doing in this episode. He's not at the interview because he's doing research on trying to track down the Kingpin, using that piece of the Prowler's suit from Alchemax Industries. He's using his computer for a while and he can't find much. Peter starts to get frustrated with himself. He says he needs to find Kingpin and fast. He doesn't know what his next move could be, but sooner or later, he's going to get impatient with Spidey and potentially even come for him personally. He knows Kingpin has the power to do so, he just chooses not to. However, he must act fast if he's to stop Fisk. We then cut to a scene with J. Jonah Jameson. He tells Robbie to print the title that Spider-Man may have something to do with Harry Osborn's disappearance. Robbie's reluctant but has to agree. Robbie tells JJ that Spider-Man is a good guy and he'd never do anything like that. And JJ says that Spider-Man has something against the Osborns and he can feel it. He says that they've all seen him fight villains at Oscorp Tower one too many times in the past year or so. JJ thinks it's suspicious and he thinks he could be picking off the Osborns one by one. We then cut to a scene with Captain Stacy and Jean DeWolf. A newspaper gets slammed onto the desk with the headline that Jameson gave to Robbie. Wolf says that they need to keep an eye out for Spider-Man. He's not in the clear just yet. She says that Jameson could be onto something, and Stacy replies with saying that he believes Spidey's a good guy. He knows that the press has been bad about him lately, but he doesn't believe that he's actually done any of it. Wolf questions him, asking can he really go against everything that's been reported on him? And Stacy says yes, that's just his gut instinct. He knows Spider-Man's a good guy. And then Wolf says, well, your gut's never wrong, so she hopes he's right. We then cut to school the next day, and Gwen bumps into Peter. She questions him about why he wasn't at the interview the other day, and Peter says he's sorry, he just couldn't make it in time. Gwen says that this is really important, his best friend is missing. Peter has got to do everything he can to help. Peter stands there silently, as the thoughts of Kingpin run through his mind. Gwen says that there's a search party going ahead later tonight, and tells him to be there. She's getting desperately worried about Harry now. Gwen walks away to class, leaving Peter stood there. We cut to after school when Peter is at home. We have a reflective moment. Peter narrates over the top, saying that he thinks maybe he should be using his great power to search for Harry. Maybe Gwen's right. Maybe his responsibility is in the wrong place, and he isn't helping enough. Not as Peter Parker, and not as Spider-Man. He's in a dilemma. If he takes his eye off the ball for one moment, the entire city could come crumbling to its knees, with Kingpin at the helm. He's felt Fisk's power firsthand, and he can't let that happen. Fisk clearly wants Spider-Man out of the picture, which is why the Prowler keeps going after him. And if he's distracted, that opens up an avenue for Kingpin to execute whatever his plan is. Peter thinks to himself, he's the only thing in between Fisk and city domination. He could go to the police, but they already have enough on their hands with Harry. Plus, what are the police going to do against a criminal warlord? He'd be bailed out the next day. Plus, the police and the city aren't really on the same page as Spidey right now after the Bugle slandered him for the Norman incident. Peter goes downstairs to meet Aunt May. She's worn out. She says she wants to go on the search for Harry tonight. But Peter says, no, you have to rest because of your heart. Peter is still worried about what happened way back in season 2. She works so hard at Feast, she can't overwork herself. May says fine, but says that Peter must go because they need a brainy boy like him to help them. Peter says that he'll be there, thinking back to what Gwen said earlier. We cut to a scene with the Kingpin, and none other than the Green Goblin. Fisk starts to explain his hatred for Donald Mencken to the Goblin, and why the plan is to take over Oscorp. He explains that Mencken should be rid of all his power, and says that Oscorp is the last piece of the puzzle to add to his criminal empire, so it all lines up. Goblin sympathizes with Kingpin and shares the information that he has a similar hatred for Mencken but for a different reason, but doesn't disclose what, and rather just says that he's a power-hungry tyrant. Fisk says that Goblin will be equipped with his resources, upgraded bombs, glider, and weaponry, and he is to bring Mencken to him. Goblin asks what is he getting out of this other than to see Mencken be annihilated. Kingpin says that Oscorp will be theirs, and they will do a 50-50 split between the two of them. Goblin agrees rather naively, but likes that idea. Fisk says that they had to halt their plan before with Spider-Man running around, but now with the addition of the Green Goblin, one of the city's most feared and powerful enemies, on their side, taking Oscorp for their own will be a piece of cake. We cut to Captain Stacy, who starts the search party. Everyone is there, including Peter. He hasn't met up with Gwen yet, but bumps into Flash, Liz, and a bunch of his other friends from school. The search goes on for a few minutes, when Captain Stacy gets a call on his radio saying that Oscorp is under attack. Peter notices the captain run off to his car and thinks this is suspicious, and decides to follow him. Peter says that something tells him that this is trouble. Peter changes into his Spider-Man costume and starts swinging and following Captain Stacy. Stacy looks in his mirror and sees Spider-Man following him and breaks a little bit of a smile. Spidey is thinking to himself that this seems serious. Kingpin has made his move. He can feel it. He notices that Stacy is going in the direction of Oscorp, and Spidey thinks to himself that this can't be good. This has to be something to do with Kingpin. They arrive at Oscorp to see it on fire on one of the top floors. He lands on the side of a building facing Oscorp, assessing the situation. And then, without warning, the unthinkable happened. A lot of unexpected twists and turns have happened in Peter Parker's life, but this is one he didn't see coming. In an array of fire, an explosion goes off on the top floor with the sound of the Goblin Pumpkin scream. Spidey's eyes widen, stating no, it can't be. Spider-Man's greatest enemy has returned. Spider-Man pulls himself through the shock and lands on the floor, helping civilians get out the building, one by one, with the looming thought of what's about to happen. Spidey says that he's got to get back up there, and the police start to tell Spider-Man that he's under arrest and he's going to be pulled into questioning. Then Captain Stacy steps in and says that this isn't the time. He may be wanted, but Spider-Man is here to help. The officers stand down and Stacy turns to Spider-Man and gives him the nod. Spidey nods back and web zips to the top of the building. He kicks through the window and lands. Spider-Man looks around. Where could he be? Where is he? Where is the Green Goblin? And then, Spider-Sense, and the Goblin swoops in, Spider-Man flipping over his glider and landing facing him as he turns around. Spider-Man says this is impossible. The Goblin is dead! And the Goblin replies with saying that the Green Goblin never dies. The Goblin says that he's going to take back what's rightfully his, and starts throwing pumpkin bombs after pumpkin bombs at Spider-Man. Spidey flips back as they explode in front of him. Then the roof above him starts to crumble and crack down in front of Spider-Man. He gets trapped as the Goblin picks up Donald Mencken. Mencken asks what he wants with him, and the Goblin says that he'll see. As Spidey is trapped under the rubble, all he can see is the menacing, piercing eyes of the Green Goblin pick up Donald Mencken, laughing like a maniac as he flies off into the night. As soon as Spidey breaks free from the rubble, the Goblin is gone, but he's back. The Green Goblin is back. Episode 7, Business 101. We start our episode with Wilson Fisk, aka the Kingpin. The Green Goblin returns with Donald Mencken to Fisk's base. He's tied down to a chair and the Goblin rips a bag off of his head. Mencken looks up to see Fisk with a face of anger. Fisk crunches a menacing smile as he looks down at Mencken, representing the shift in power between the two. Fisk mentions that he said he'd win. Kingpin goes on to monologue about how he's always liked a fair fight, and that he told Donald Mencken that he was coming, and that he had time to prepare, but what did he do? Wallowed in his own self-pity. He goes on to say how he has all the money in the world, but where is his happiness? Mencken angrily responds with that Fisk has no happiness and is just as soulless as the rest of us, and Fisk says that his happiness lies within taking this for his own, fighting for control. That's where Fisk gets his buzz. Mencken squints and leans in and says that's not all true. true, is it? Fisk squints back almost angrily before moving on. Fisk had made his own move and won. Mencken turns to the goblin and says, "Who are you meant to be? Norman Osborn is dead." Mencken's eyes widen. He says he knows who's under that mask and starts to get really worked up about it, before Fisk interrupts, and the goblin lets out a gaggling chuckle. Fisk places a piece of paper in front of Mencken, telling him to sign the contract, to legally place all of Oscorp's assets into his hands. Mencken says no, and Fisk says that he'll find a way. Fisk says to Prowler to power up the machine. Prowler presses a button, and Mencken starts to be shocked. We cut to the Parker household as Peter comes home all bruised and battered. He gets flashbacks from the previous goblin fight, showing the toll that the goblin has had on his life. He's scared. Peter Parker is terrified of the goblin. That, along with everything else that has been going on, Peter is at his breaking point. This season has really been testing Spider-Man's patience and resilience. Peter is being pushed to his absolute limit, and we're going to start to see the effects of that here. We then cut to a scene of Gwen and Captain Stacy. Gwen returns home to George and says that they found nothing. Harry is really missing, and he could be anywhere. Captain Stacy says that he's sorry he had to leave. The goblin is back and he was destroying Oscorp Tower. Gwen is shocked, but goes on to say that you wouldn't believe who didn't show up, and she says that Peter never showed his face. And Captain Stacy says that he must have been doing something really important not to show up, as he cracks a little smile in the corner of his mouth. The next day they all go to class and things return fairly normally. They are in business class today. They teach the students an introduction to business and what the key elements of it are. I chose this subject for this episode purely as an expositionatory element to supplement the events taking place between Fisk, the Goblin, and Donald Mencken, almost mirroring the villains and our heroes. We cut to a scene after class and Gwen approaches Peter in the hallway. She asks Peter why he didn't show up to the search, and she seems really annoyed at him. She says that Harry is out there somewhere and that he isn't helping. She starts to tear up a little bit. Peter says that he's sorry, and Gwen says that that isn't good enough at this point. It's like he doesn't care. She turns away from him and walks away. We then get a scene with Spider-Man swinging calmly through the city. He lands on a building and mentally goes through everything that is happening. He has the Kingpin stuff, the Goblin is back, Harry is missing, and so is Mencken. What's next? Peter then has a realization. Maybe Harry is the Goblin. He has been taking the green again and no one has seen him. Then he stops himself, saying that he can't jump to them conclusions when they don't know anything about Harry's disappearance yet. Although it would make sense. He also reflects on the Gwen situation, saying that it's 1 step forward and 3 steps back with her. He tries to be there for her as Peter Parker, but struggles when Spider-Man's life comes in the way of that. Spidey then pulls out the piece of armor that fell off the Prowler, and says that with everything going on, he has to start somewhere. And hey, by any luck, all this could be connected, says Peter joyfully to himself. He then retracts and says that by his luck, probably not, but he'll have to see. We cut to a scene of Captain Stacy and Jean DeWolf at the office. They discuss how they're under a lot of pressure. Harry is missing, Mencken is missing. Wolf questions if they could be connected through Oscorp, once again forwarding that idea that outsiders like the police and Spider-Man are starting to clock onto everything that has been happening. Stacy says that he's unsure, but it's not off the cards just yet, and says that they need to act, and they need to act fast. We cut to Kingpin, Goblin, and Mencken. Kingpin continues to threaten Mencken, saying if he doesn't comply, he will make sure he is destroyed, and Mencken breaks and finally agrees, saying that he'll sign the contract. Fisk says to Mencken that he'll give everything up to save his own life, but will risk everything for his own family. Mencken says don't bring them into this, and it's this scene that then reveals that past we've been hearing so much about between Fisk and Mencken. It's revealed that they once knew each other in the criminal underworld a couple of years ago. Mencken and Fisk did deals together, and one time they had a big score. Mencken lied to Fisk about the deal and took everything for himself, showing his selfishness. That same day, when Fisk found out, Mencken's family went missing, never to be seen again. This scene will show the type of person Mencken is. He cares more about his work and values his own life over his family, showing how selfish Mencken is at the core. Mencken will break down and Fisk will say, "You should have never backstabbed him," and goes on to say how he's finally had his revenge and shown Mencken who's top dog. New York will be ruled by the Kingpin once and for all. However, the Kingpin does keep to his word and does let Mencken go. Kingpin tells the Goblin to take him away. The Goblin gasses him and drags him away and flies off. We cut to a scene of Spider-Man swinging through the city as he lands near a building with the address that he dug up after researching for days on end about Alchemax. He says that this is the place that the Prowler tech supposedly originates from. Alchemax isn't a well-known tech company, so it's hard to track down. He says this place is fairly normal. The building isn't secluded, but isn't overly exposed either. He enters through a window and it's just a normal factory. The workers look up and see Spider-Man. Spidey drops down and says that he's here for someone called the Kingpin. The workers say that they've never never heard of him. Spidey thinks that this is suspicious as he looks down to the worker's jacket and sees the same logo which was on the Prowler's armor. Spidey's confused. Spidey swings to the top of the building and sneaks through the vent. The worker activates his radio and tells Fisk that Spider-Man is here, revealing this is the cover-up factory, hiding Fisk's base. Fisk is shocked by this and says that this is their time to finally take him out. After having a little look around, Spidey couldn't find anything, and was about to leave until all the doors close and the workers in the factory all aim guns at him. Spidey says, well, why don't you make it obvious, Fisk? They all fire at him and Spidey dodges all the bullets, twisting and turning, taking the workers out one by one. He looks up to one of the security cameras and points, saying that he's here. Fisk grits his teeth. The Prowler is about to go and fight Spider-Man. However, Fisk stops him, saying no. It's his turn. A secret elevator door opens, and Fisk arrives into the factory, standing opposite Spider-Man. They exchange in dialogue, Peter's suit already ripped and teared from his encounter with the Green Goblin. He looks exhausted, and facing such a threat makes him look like he's even smaller, and with no fighting chance. Fisk says that he is impressed that he found his base of operations. Spidey says that he's not going to stop until he is behind bars. They face off, and Spidey gets beaten to a pulp. They come to a standstill, and Fisk says that this is his final warning. Fisk says that he always gets jobs done with ease, but Spider-Man made him try, which is impressive and yet admirable. But if he interferes with his plans again, he will kill him, and promises that. Spidey then manages to break free and escapes as he swings away. He tries to swing home but collapses on top of a building. Spidey never runs from a fight, but this time, it was too much. If he is to stop Kingpin, brute force is not the way either. He takes his mask off, and his face is bloodied and bruised. He finally gets home and narrates over the top. Harry is missing. The Goblin is on the loose. Fisk is more powerful than ever. And there's no word on Mencken. He needs to rest, but he won't. He can't rest until the chaos is over. Episode 8. Investigation. We start our episode with Donald Mencken. He lies asleep on the street after being dropped off from the last episode when someone approaches him and wakes him up. It's Jean DeWolf. She calls Captain Stacy saying that she found Mencken. Captain Stacy races down there immediately to go and pick him up. We then cut to our main protagonist, Peter Parker, who is just about to leave for school. He goes downstairs and says goodbye to Aunt May. He is on his way to school as a crime is going down. He says just his luck. Spidey swings down to the scene of the crime and takes out the thugs. He says it's nice to have a normal robbery every once in a while, joking around saying that all the Fisk stuff and the Green Goblin stuff is all getting to him a little too much. Then the police arrive on the scene. Jean DeWolf steps out of the car. Spidey remembers how the public and police perception of him recently isn't all that good and was about to swing off, before DeWolf shouts to him to wait. Spidey turns around and DeWolf says Captain Stacy wants to see him, and that it's about Mencken. She states that he's not under arrest, they just need his help. He enters the room with Captain Stacy and thinks to himself that he wouldn't be surprised if this was all a ploy from Jonah to try and get him arrested somehow. Captain Stacy says thanks for coming and makes out that it's a rare occasion where they'd need Spider-Man to come in. He says that Spidey knows the Goblin like no one else, so they need his help. Stacy takes Spider-Man into a room where sits Donald Mencken, slumped over the table, tired, almost zombie-like. Stacy says they're about to interview Mencken. If there's anything that Mencken says that Spidey can piece together to help arrest the Goblin, that would be extremely helpful. Spider-Man nods in agreement. We then cut over to Midtown High with Gwen Stacy at school. She's wondering where Peter is as she's looking at her watch when Flash approaches her. He pulls her aside a second and says that he knows him and Peter weren't the best of friends, but Flash is just asking if both of them are doing okay with all the Harry stuff going on at the moment. Gwen is surprised by this and says that they are fine, they're just worried like the rest of the school. Flash awkwardly and nervously says that if there's anything he can do to help, he'd love to. This scene once again pulling out that Flash character arc, developing him from that jock phase that has had plastering his life ever since the start of high school, pulling him into a more respectable and kind person. However, Flash does say that if she tells anyone that he offered any slight bit of sympathy, he'll be mad. Gwen almost jokingly says that she won't. We cut back to Donald Mencken, Spider-Man and Captain Stacy. Spider-Man sits down at the table with Stacy next to him and DeWolf in the background. Mencken says that they both wouldn't believe what happened if he told them. Spidey goes on to talk about how he's been stuck as to why everything with the Goblin is going on, and then Fisk as well. Spider-Man asks why the Goblin took him, and then Mencken says that it wasn't the Goblin's idea to take me. Spider-Man is confused and shocked as he can almost sense the answer. Mencken says that it was Fisk. Spider-Man's eyes widen as the realization of the two being connected all falls into place. The Green Goblin and Wilson Fisk are working together. Spidey and Stacy then ask why. Mencken says that this leads him on to his next point. The Goblin is the only type to work with someone else when he has a common enemy. Stacy says that it has to be Spider-Man, but then Spidey says that that wouldn't explain why he'd want Mencken. Mencken puts his head down with a little bit of remorse. And then Stacy questions him, what is it? Mencken lifts his head up and says that he thinks he knows who the Goblin is. Spider-Man's eyes squint. He says to himself in his head that Mencken better be careful what he says next. Mencken goes on to say that he thinks the Green Goblin is Harry Osborn. And ever since he's missing, it would make so much sense, he says, as Spider-Man reluctantly hesitates to agree. Spider-Man is skeptical. He doesn't want to admit that it's actually Harry. Mencken says that Harry approached him a couple of weeks ago after all of Oscorp's assets were pointed to himself. Mencken goes on to explain that Harry was angry that he was taking the last bit of legacy he had away from him, but also explains that he is just a kid at school. He couldn't run a company. Stacy says to stop pleading he hasn't done anything wrong and to just tell him what happened. Mencken explains the heritage connection between Harry and Norman and how it would just make perfect sense if he was the Goblin. Spider-Man looks down and Captain Stacy looks over to Spidey and could tell it affected him. Spidey looks over to Mencken and says that they can't be sure. Mencken says that he doesn't know for sure either, but it's just his theory. Stacy steps in and says that they're getting off topic. It still doesn't explain why the Goblin kidnapped him. He goes on to ask what they wanted. Mencken says that Fisk wanted Oscorp to himself. For the longest time, he's been waiting in the shadows. First Tombstone, then Doc Ock, and now Wilson Fisk. Fisk will be the kingpin of New York, and he made Mencken sign the legal contracts. Oscorp legally is in his hands, and there is nothing they can do about it. Stacy realizes slowly that the Kingpin now almost has full control over New York. Oscorp is the biggest company in the city, and Fisk is at the helm. Mencken also says that if the Kingpin finds out that he told them any of this, he will come back and kill them. Wilson Fisk had stayed in the shadows for such a long time, but now his reign over New York has finally begun. Stacy says that he'll make sure Fisk doesn't find out. Spidey gets up and goes outside to talk to Stacy privately. Spider-Man says that he feels relieved since all the pieces are now in place. And then Captain Stacy asks if he thinks Harry Osborn is really the Green Goblin. Spider-Man says that that's not Harry. He wouldn't do that. Obviously, Spider-Man regrettingly saying this in denial after Mencken has told him all the facts and evidence. Stacy asks if he knows Osborn. He's talking about him as if he knows him. He goes on to say that he saw Spidey's reaction when Mencken brought him up. Spider-Man says that he's just a family friend, more of like a friend of a friend. Captain Stacy doesn't seem convinced, and then Spider-Man leaves. We cut to the Kingpin and the Green Goblin as they enter Oscorp. Fisk feels proud to have finally accomplished his mission. Oscorp is finally his. The Goblin turns to him and says it's good to have the power beneath their teeth. Fisk responds with his teeth as he turns around menacingly. Goblin asks what is he talking about, and Fisk says that he has no need for him anymore. Goblin is confused. He thought Oscorp was theirs, and Fisk says that he altered the contract so all the assets fall to Fisk and Fisk only. The Goblin doesn't own a cent of Oscorp Industries. The Kingpin has screwed the Goblin over, and in this moment, and everything the Goblin had been fighting for has crumbled beneath him. Fisk once again showing he is the big powerhouse of New York, toppling such foes as the Green Goblin. Goblin lashes out in anger at Fisk, attacking him with all his strength and power. A fistfight breaks out between the two. It's bloody and brutal. However, Kingpin's skill and strength prevails as he beats the Goblin down. This scene once again showcasing Fisk's strength and integrity. Fisk says to get out of his building, and Goblin ends up limping away and calling on his glider to escape before Fisk beats him down anymore. Fisk watches on as all the power lands to him. We cut back to Peter, sitting on a building, contemplating all of the evidence and all the pieces coming together. He now has to dictate his next move very carefully. Could Harry be the Goblin? Is Fisk controlling him this entire time? He decides that he needs to lay low for a while. He can't know for sure until anyone makes their next move. But until then, he'll take things slow and normal. And hey, you could always use the time in between to catch up with Gwen as well. We cut to the next day when Peter is in school. He bumps into Gwen on his way home, and she seems annoyed. Gwen says she knew he didn't care. He wasn't even at the search party for Harry. Peter says that he was there, they just didn't see each other. Obviously, Peter isn't lying here, he's just not referring to the fact that he had to leave early. Gwen sighs and says that she's sorry for snapping, it's just that the prospect of Harry not turning up is looking more and more likely. Peter says that they'll find him. He knows they will. Peter and Gwen share a hug together. They pull away and lock eyes. That same feeling from back in season 2 drives over them again. That want that made Gwen kiss him on his doorstep. And out of nowhere, Peter and Gwen kiss for the first time in a while. Just like that. Gwen pulls away surprised. Peter also pulls away surprised. Gwen says that she's sorry, she shouldn't have done that, especially with the circumstances going on. She was just filled with emotion. Peter says it felt right, and Gwen reluctantly agrees. She knows that's what she wants, but she's conflicted. She can't turn her back on Harry, not after everything that has been going on. Peter understands this too. Peter awkwardly drops Gwen off at home, and it's a very awkward scene. It's a very rigid scene, one that you could cut through with a knife. And then Peter goes home himself. Gwen is at home, unwinding, thinking about the events that have just transpired, and also thinking about how they're going to find Harry. Captain Stacy is also out on patrol, when a knock is at the door. And a bloodied and bruised, beaten Harry Osborn shows up at her door. Breaking down into Gwen's arms, she asks him what happened, and where he has been. That is it for today's episode of Spectacular Spider-Man Season 3. If you did enjoy this episode, make sure to hit that like button, and if you don't want to miss the next episode, make sure you hit that subscribe button and make sure to hit the bell next to the subscribe button so you don't miss the video as soon as it goes out on the channel. You'll be one of the first ones to watch a video, and with that being said, thank you all for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care, and peace. Episode 9, Deception. We start this episode right where the last one left off, with Harry Osborn meeting Gwen Stacy at her house. Harry is broken, confused. He doesn't know what to think, how to think. Gwen is shocked as she catches Harry in her arms as he breaks down at her porch. She is frantically asking him questions. Are you okay? Where have you been? What's going on? Harry whimpers and doesn't answer. Gwen brings Harry inside and sits him down. She says hold on, she's going to call Peter, when Harry bursts out with a massive jolt of energy, screaming not to get Peter. Gwen is taken back by this as she slowly puts her phone back in her pocket. Harry is in a state of shock and despair. We cut to 1 week later in Midtown High. Peter sees Gwen in the hallway. He approaches her and says hi. Gwen is awkward though, something's off. Peter narrates to himself in his head that it's been this way for a week. He thinks to himself that she surely can't be still hung up about that kiss, can she? Peter carries on with his day as we slowly start to realize as an audience that Gwen hasn't told anyone about Harry and has kept him a secret. We cut to Gwen after school as she returns to a little hideout where Harry has been staying for a while. It's revealed that Gwen has been trying to get what has happened out of Harry, but he didn't want to talk. This time around, he does. And with a shiver, Harry explains everything. How he took the green, how he became the Green Goblin, and how Wilson Fisk took the only thing left that he had. He says he still wants to kill him. Gwen says he doesn't have to do that, and that he can get better. Harry says he must, he has to, as he breaks down and starts to cry. Harry says he doesn't want to get arrested. He can't. Gwen says that they'll work out something, although worried herself that she might get into trouble for knowing she's hiding a convict. She desperately needs to tell Peter. She needs to get it off her chest. We cut to Spider-Man, who is contemplating the situation with Gwen, where the crime scene goes down as he hears police cars rush to the scene. Gwen calls him during his swing over there, as she wants to tell him about Harry. Peter declines and says that's the worst timing ever. Gwen thinks to herself that maybe he just feels awkward about the whole kiss situation that they had. Meanwhile, Peter is dealing with a mass of criminals. This is when we learn over the last week Fisk's empire has grew to immense levels after his takeover of Oscorp. His forces are so strong that they're overwhelming police, and New York is slowly becoming a war zone and a dangerous place to live. Spider-Man aids the police, and they defeat the criminals. We cut to a scene with Spider-Man and Captain Stacy. They discuss the situation that they're in. The Goblin is MIA. Fisk is now in control of one of the most powerful companies on the planet. They're in dire need of some help. Stacy also says that they can't arrest him or even get a warrant for Oscorp due to the amount of power he holds over the courts, which really puts into perspective how much power Norman Osborn had when he was the higher power at Oscorp. But Stacy said he's going to ask Spider-Man to do something he'd never think of doing before. He says their situation is desperate and he'd never do anything outside of the books, but he wants him to infiltrate Oscorp himself and get some information that can criminalize Fisk enough to put him in for an arrest. None of his crooks will speak, and they have no substantial evidence against him, although they know everything is revolving around Fisk. All the criminal activity, everything going around in New York at the moment is because of Fisk. All they have is Donald Menken's word, but because a contract was signed, they can't really prove anything. It's Fisk's word against his. So Captain Stacy is asking Spider-Man if he'll go into Oscorp and infiltrate himself. Stacy also goes on to explain how he has a daughter, a family, people he needs to protect. And with the chaos, he says, I'm sure you can understand. Peter gets a suspicious look from Captain Stacy, as if he's talking to Peter Parker and not Spider-Man, just for a moment. Peter snaps out of a very awkward state and says that he'll do it. He agrees, as he has people he loves too, people who he doesn't want to get hit in the crossfire. And thus, a few scenes later, we kick on to the main bulk of the episode, Spider-Man infiltrating Oscorp. This part of the episode will be intense, action-packed, and thrilling. Spider-Man will be crawling through the vents and sneaking around Oscorp in classic fashion, taking down guards and enemies similar to the stealth missions we see in Spider-Man PS4. He's on the hunt for a drive or something where he can claim information for the police to have an arrest warrant for Fisk. Spider-Man finally finds something when he's interrupted by none other than the Prowler, Fisk's right-hand man. Spider-Man turns around and gets into a fighting pose. The last few times these two have met, Spider-Man has been outmatched, but this time, it's game on. He won't lose again. They engage in battle. It's scrappier than the first times, and Spider-Man tries to hold his own. Guards are alerted, and thus Kingpin as well. Prowler smashes Spider-Man out of the window as Peter tries to keep the fight within Oscorp as to not hurt civilians below, as he web-kicks Prowler back onto a lower level. The Prowler once again spears him out of the window as they crash land on the pavement below. They fight each other, and the battle is fierce. Spidey's suit becomes ripped and torn. Spider-Man gets the upper hand, however, he finally defeats the Prowler once and for all. The Prowler is arrested, as Spider-Man hands a drive to Captain Stacy with all of the information on criminal records, everything. Stacy says that it's time for the big showdown. This will be enough evidence to take down Fisk once and for all. Spider-Man agrees and says that the big final act is finally coming. After all is settled, we get a scene where Peter calls Gwen back. Gwen seems nerved and says that he can't tell him over the phone what she was going to say, and that they need to meet in real life. Peter leaves and Aunt May tells him not to be back too late. He says he's just going to meet Gwen. They meet one another and Peter asks if things have been awkward because of what happened, and Gwen says no, but something has happened, something big. She tells him that Harry came back, and says that he was the Green Goblin. The Spider-Man side of Peter saw this coming, although he didn't want to admit it. But to play up the Peter Parker side of things, he acts surprised. Gwen explains to Peter how he came to her all battered and bruised last week after the fight he had with Wilson Fisk, the guy he's been working for to try and get Oscorp back. Peter is in shock. This puts Peter in a very, very difficult position. On one hand, the girl he's falling in love with wants to protect his best friend from going to prison, but on the other, he's pledged and finally regained the trust of the public and the police force through the faith of Captain Stacy. Not to mention, that's the girl who he loves' father. Peter has a situation on his hands, and no matter what the outcome, it's a lose-lose situation for him. He has to pick his responsibility as Spider-Man or his friendship as Peter Parker. An ultimatum, if you will. Something that constantly plagues Spider-Man's life. And at the end of the episode, we cut to Oscorp Tower. Kingpin is in peril. He knows he's lost, but he won't go down without a fight. Once and for all, he will kill Spider-Man. But on the horizon, a new threat lurks as an orange figure lingers on a glider similar to that of the Green Goblin, pledging his destruction to Wilson Fisk's empire. Episode 10, Arrest Warrant. We start out our episode from where we left off. Everything is frantic. The police and Captain Stacy track down the main culprit to the Green Goblin crimes, Harry Osborn, and arrest him. Harry is spotted walking the streets of Midtown, and the NYPD get news of this and arrest him promptly. Following all the evidence gathered, the green in his locker, and the proposed speculation by Donald Mencken. This episode will follow an interview-like structure at the beginning, where the events of the season so far are recapped in interviews, where all the pieces are put together. Harry Osborn is interviewed first. He denies all the claims towards him being the Goblin. They say that they have evidence of him taking the green, and Harry sulks and looks down, saying that he got addicted back when his father died. But he isn't the Goblin. He said he was framed for being the Goblin once before, but he would never actually become him. He says the Green Goblin is insane, and that's not him. Obviously, when off the green, Harry stops having blackouts, which turn him fully into the Green Goblin. Next in are Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy. As they are friends of Harry Osborn, they are also questioned if they know anything about the case. Both of them say that they don't know anything at all, not only to protect Harry, but Peter also can't reveal anything about him being Spider-Man, as anything he said or does could be incriminated and tracked back to him being the Wallcrawler. During the interview, Peter is opposite Captain Stacy, and when Peter says he knows nothing, Captain Stacy gives him a certain look and asks him if he's sure. Peter is confused and stuck for what to say, but he confirms that he knows nothing and asks to leave. Captain Stacy grants his wish, but gives a suspicious look to Peter on his way out. We will cut to Midtown High, where Flash Thompson and the rest of his friendship group find out about the news of the arrest of Harry. Although Harry had ruined Flash's chances of winning the football championship for Midtown, he feels some kind of remorse for Harry, as he knows he's had a tough time recently over the last year since his father's death. It is also revealed in this scene that the Midtown football team has actually made it to the quarterfinals of this year's championship, and with no Harry Osborn, Flash is determined to win this trophy fair and square, an arc that was set up for him way back in Season 2. We cut to a scene with Peter in a criminology class, ironically talking about arrest warrants and how they are made, reflecting the meaning of the episode in classic Spectacular Spider-Man fashion. Peter exits the class and looks down into his bag to see his torn and worn Spider-Man costume. He thinks to himself that he probably should get that fixed before it's just him fighting the crime instead of Spider-Man. He said he's had no time to fix it with everything that has been going on. Peter's next course of action is to find a way to finally capture Fisk. Although Harry is in prison, at least the Goblin is dealt with, and that's one less worry on his mind. Plus, Fisk's right-hand man, the Prowler, is also dealt with, which means Fisk remains. The war is almost over. Peter can feel it. We cut onto later in the episode, and the police are ready for their raid on Oscorp. It needs to be swift. Since the last episode, the police have been preparing for their biggest and final stand against Wilson Fisk and his empire. This ends now before it gets more out of control. Captain Stacy and the NYPD arrive on the scene at Oscorp, but to their surprise, the top floor of Oscorp Tower has smoke protruding from it quite violently. Captain Stacy radios in saying that they need the fire service and other officers on standby if things get messy. We cut to Peter, who has just returned from school, stressed out about Harry and the whole situation. Aunt May confronts him and asks him if he's okay. We get a nice slow scene at this point in the episode between these two characters here. I think this season, in the last few episodes, hasn't had enough of just May and Peter together with all the action and reveals going on. However, the news comes on and it's breaking. Oscorp Tower under attack once again. The police are already outside. Peter stands up and says that the Bugle will need photos, cutting short this moment between May and Peter, once again reflecting how chaotic Spider-Man's life is, and how Peter never gets to spend any time with his loved ones. Aunt May tells him to be careful, and Peter nods and leaves. Spider-Man swings onto the scene in his torn-up costume from the last episode, as a massive grin appears on Captain Stacy's face as they make their way into the building. Spider-Man shouts out to Fisk, but there's no sign of him. Peter searches around, under rubble, and in varying rooms. The idea of arresting him now is a distant thought, as it turns into a concern of life or death. Where is Wilson Fisk? Where is he gone? Peter continues to search for Fisk or any sign of life, but the building has been evacuated and is desolate. But then, Spider-Sense! Peter turns around and it's a pumpkin bomb! It blows up in Spider-Man's face, sending him back and into the debris. As the police and Captain Stacy make their way up the stairs, the building rumbles beneath them, knocking some of them over. Captain Stacy thinks this can't be good. They carry on their way up, and Stacy sends some officers into a different room to scout out the areas in search of Fisk. We cut back to Peter, as his mask is torn on one side, but still covering the majority of his face. His costume teared, torn, ripped, and has splatters of blood on it from the amount of wounds that Peter has endured. Then Captain Stacy arrives on the floor and sees Peter lying down, barely moving. He rushes to his aid and calls his name. Peter wakes up to Captain Stacy leaning over him, calling him by his real name. Peter leaps up frantically and touches his face, his mask still covering the majority of it, not enough to tell that it's Peter Parker underneath. Stacy asks if he's alright. Peter says that he's fine, confusingly. Stacy says he's always known, as he notices the confusion in the one lone eye that pierces through his worn costume, and smirks slightly out the corner of his mouth. He says that they need to go. This place could be riddled with traps. Captain Stacy helps carry Peter out of the building. Peter, struggling to speak, tells Captain Stacy that the bomb wasn't any kind of bomb. It was from none other than the Goblin. He's back, but how? Nobody knows. And Fisk is missing. Episode 11, Filmmaking 101. We start our episode between an injured Spider-Man and Captain Stacy. He asks how he knew his identity, and Captain Stacy tells Peter that he always knew, even way back in Season 1. He says he's always had an inkling that something was going on with Peter. He says all those rumors a few months back about him being responsible for Norman Osborn's death just weren't true. He knows the type of person Spider-Man is, and the type of person Peter Parker is. Peter is shocked, but also delighted that he has someone sticking his neck out for him all this time, and he's appreciative. And this nice scene between the two, there's a mutual respect. Stacy respects what Spider-Man stands for and who he is, and likewise. They then go on to talk about the Goblin, and Peter says that it was him, and there's no one else it could be. There's no one else who could use pumpkin bombs in that same fashion, other than the Green Goblin himself. Captain Stacy questions himself whether they got the right man by arresting Harry Osborn. Peter stays quiet during this time, however, as to not rat out his best friend. The conversation ends and Peter leaves. After though, there is someone that arrives at the police station who wants to talk to Captain Stacy. Her name is Emma Edwards, a film student at Empire State University who is making a student film, a documentary for her film class about Spider-Man and his rivalry with the Green Goblin. Captain Stacy refuses to talk to her as he cannot give away classified information. Emma leaves the police station disappointed, but says desperate times call for desperate measures. If she wants this documentary to be done, there's one man who could give her all the answers. That's Spider-Man himself. I know this character seems kind of random at the moment, but you guys will understand the importance of this character later on in the episode and in the next one as well. We cut on to later in the episode, and Harry Osborn is released from prison, as more evidence has arisen which indirectly don't tie him to any of the Goblin's crimes, as he still exists out there somewhere. Not only that, Wilson Fisk has gone missing too. Harry returns home to his mother at the Osborn mansion. We get a scene where Harry and his mother embrace. She can't believe she has finally got her son back in her arms. A couple of scenes later, and we cut on to Peter Parker hearing about the news of Harry's release. He thinks it's better he sees him. After all, what friend would he be if he wasn't there for him? Peter arrives at Harry's house. He knocks on the door and Emily opens it. She says that Harry isn't very well and she doesn't think that anyone should be visiting at the moment. Peter says that it's his best friend and he just wants to see how he's getting on. Despite everything that has happened over the last couple of episodes, Peter loves Harry and he'll always love him. Harry is sent out to greet Peter, but he doesn't look happy. Peter, just trying to be friendly, is dismissed by Harry, saying that Peter is a rat, just like everyone else. This catches him off guard, but Harry goes on to explain how he knows his and Gwen's plan to get together and to leave him and Liz, and how it's stretched all the way back to season 2. Peter, scrambling for words and what to say, looks down and sighs. He says he's sorry. Harry says sorry doesn't cut it. Not this time. He's threw their friendship back in his face so many times over the last year and a half, but that was a new low, even for Peter. Harry says he's done, and to get out of his house. Peter leaves glum, but understanding of Harry. Him and Gwen shouldn't have been talking about getting together behind his back, nor him or Liz. Neither of them deserved it. He already got his payback from Liz back in episode 3, but now Harry has come back to bite him too. We cut to the next scene, and Peter meets up with Gwen at school. They're sitting on a bench outside having lunch together. Peter explains what Harry had told him, and Gwen sulks, but then looks up to meet Peter in his eyes. She says that she likes him. She says that she likes him a lot, and they should just stop beating around the bush. They both like each other. Peter says that he agrees, as he stretches his hand out and holds Gwen's. Gwen says that first, they'll have to wait till this whole saga with Harry is over. After all, he said he was the Green Goblin. Who knows what he's capable of? You don't want to make the wrong move. You don't want to do something that could make it worse. The Spider-Man side of Peter knows this, but knows that if anything were to happen, he would be the first to know, and he'd keep Gwen safe. But ultimately, since he can't reveal his identity, he also agrees with Gwen. We cut back to inside the halls of Midtown High, and Peter is taking his sweater off at his locker, which reveals a massive big bruise on Peter's elbow and arm from the explosion at Oscorp Tower. It's something that looked quite severe and unnatural. Mary Jane Watson notices this from afar and approaches Peter. She asks him if he's gone to the nurse about that. Looks like something quite big bit him. And Peter says no, he's fine. He did it playing sports. MJ goes on to say that she didn't know that he played sports much, in a flirty manner. Peter sarcastically responds with, "That's one of the reasons why I don't much," as he alludes to his bruise. MJ gets serious for a second, however, saying that she's heard through their aunts talking to each other that Peter is having a difficult time. She says that she's heard that he's been down and quite distant recently because of the situation with Harry. Peter says that he's fine, but MJ says to keep your head up, Tiger, and gives a cheeky smirk before Peter walks off. We can see in this scene in MJ's eyes that she resonates with Peter about something here. The intrigue of Peter's secrets keeps her on her toes, but also she relates as she has some secrets of her own. We cut on to after school and Peter is at the Daily Bugle handing photos in to good old J. Jonah Jameson. The Daily Bugle sales have been on a decline since the interest in Spider-Man's demise has been decreasing. Jonah says that he can't pay Peter as much as he usually would because of the decline in sales. He explains to Peter that in the next few months, the Bugle is going to hit a rough patch. He proclaims positively though that Spider-Man will screw up again sometime. Peter resonates with this for a moment, thinking that him and Aunt May haven't really had that many money troubles recently because Peter has been chipping some to the bills, that he might just be back to square one after all. Peter leaves the Bugle and bumps into none other than Emma Edwards outside, the film student from the start of the episode. She immediately asks him about Spider-Man and how he got the pictures of him. Peter says that he just gets lucky and asks Emma to explain herself. Emma says that she wants to do a documentary about Spider-Man for her film class and wants to do an interview with him. Peter says that Spider-Man doesn't give interviews, and Emma asks, how does Peter know that? Peter, nervously scrambling for an answer, just says that he knows him, and that he knows that he wouldn't. Emma hesitantly lets Peter get on with his day, but thinks something is suspicious about him. On Peter's way home, Emma ultimately follows him, until a police car races past. Peter notices this, and immediately goes into an alleyway, and out comes Spider-Man. Emma knew something was up, as she grants a keen smirk. Spider-Man arrives on the crime scene and starts to take out thugs one by one, quipping as he does it in classic Spider-Man fashion. Emma also arrives on the scene a little bit later. She starts recording, but she gets caught in the crossfire, and Spider-Man swoops in to save her. As soon as Peter realizes who it is, his eyes widen, and Emma discreetly whispers that she knows his secret. Spider-Man goes on to deal with the rest of the thugs. We cut onto the next scene at the top of a building, where Spider-Man and Emma talk. Emma says that she followed Peter, and she knows that he's Spider-Man. Peter, astonished by this, says that this is next level creepy. He says that she can't do that. Emma asks for an interview, and Peter says no way. Emma says that if he doesn't give an interview, she can just give out his secret identity. After all, she now has that power. And to this, Peter complies and says fine, one interview, but no more. And then you forget that you ever saw him as Spider-Man. During the interview, Peter talks about the fights he's had with Green Goblin, but doesn't rat Harry's name out. In fact, he doesn't really talk about anyone else personally, only the base level fights that he's had with some of his supervillains. Simply, Peter gives her as blunt information as he possibly can, but enough for her documentary. He tells her about Fisk and the whole situation as well. After the interview, Emma says thank you. Peter respects the hustle and says it's very smart, but to never do that ever again, and to never tell anyone he's Spider-Man, as the mask and his powers carry a whole lot of responsibility, and the answers he gave her in a student project carry a lot of weight and responsibility too. Emma nods, and Spider-Man swings off. She looks down though, maybe what Peter said was true. Even still, she isn't done. There's one piece of the puzzle missing. She wants the end of the mystery too, just like Peter. Who is the Goblin? As Peter swings off into the night, there's still much to be done, but the final showdown is nearly here. Fisk is out there somewhere, and along with him, probably the Goblin too. But how? Peter isn't sure quite yet, but he's sure he'll find out very, very soon. Episode 12, Literature 101. We start our episode establishing Peter Parker trying to guess at what the next move on the chessboard is. He's thinking to himself as he makes his way downstairs to greet Aunt May, who is making breakfast. Peter is so inside his own head, he ignores May at first, until she calls him out on it. Peter responds to her, and she asks him if he's okay. Peter says yes bluntly, still thinking about what has to be done to end this war that has gone on for way too long now. First Fisk, then Harry is the Goblin, but it turns out he's not the Goblin. What's next? Where is Fisk? How can Peter fix all of this before the city becomes a war zone? A hellhole. Aunt May interrupts this chain of thoughts and tells Peter that Anna Watson is currently coming for dinner, and she is bringing Mary Jane with her as well. Peter looks unnerved, and Aunt May says that it would be great if he could be there. Peter thinks to himself that he's kind of neglected his and Aunt May's relationship recently. He probably should try and spend some time with her. But with everything that's going on, it's becoming increasingly difficult. He vows to do it though, to himself, and for Aunt May. Peter agrees and then leaves for school. Whilst in school, Peter and the class are learning about literature. As per the school connection to every episode, the teacher will be talking about good twists in writing and literature history. The teacher will go on to talk about how the villain may not end up who they seem to be at first. You really have to dig deep and find an ulterior and hidden motive. Peter isn't taking anything in, and Gwen will notice this. After class, she asks if he's okay. He looks a bit out of it. Peter says that he's fine, he's just feeling very overwhelmed about the whole situation with Harry. Gwen holds Peter's face and says it's going to be okay. He also confesses to Gwen that the Bugle is going to hit a rough patch in the next couple of months, and he doesn't know how he's going to be able to support his Aunt May. Although she works at Feast now, it's not enough to keep them fully afloat, and Peter has to chip in every once in a while. Gwen tries to reassure Peter, saying that everything will work out okay. He could look for a job someplace else instead, obviously not understanding the importance of Spider-Man. Peter in this moment realizes, if Gwen knew that he was Spider-Man, that it would all make so much sense to her, and it would make things so much easier. Not only for himself not having to hide everything, but for their relationship. Maybe Gwen would feel safer. But would it be selfish to put her in that position? Would it be selfish to burden her with the fact that he has to go out and risk his life every time a new supervillain is on the loose? Or is he hurting her more, and the chances of their relationship happening if he isn't honest with her? This is something that will ponder Peter's mind. We will cut to Emma Edwards, who is currently doing some research on the Goblin Spider-Man story for her documentary. She watches the final cut but thinks it's missing something. A conclusion. Something to wrap up the story. She thinks back to what Peter told her about Fisk, and how he was taken, and how the police currently don't know his whereabouts. She thinks if she could just find Fisk, this whole Goblin saga could be over, and she could finish a documentary as well. It was perfect. So Emma begins researching into the case. Peter is on his way home. He'll just be back in time for dinner, but in classic Peter Parker fashion, he spots a crime going down in the distance. Peter attends to the situation. It's only a couple of thugs, until he notices in the distance, it's that girl. After dealing with the situation, Spider-Man goes and greets her. Emma gives an awkward smile on their initial greeting. Spider-Man says that he thought he said not to get involved in any of this, and Emma says that she's looking for an ending to everything. Spider-Man says same, but she should not be intervening, she's gonna get hurt. Emma says that she just needs an ending to her documentary. Peter says that he doesn't think that's a good idea, and Emma asks for Peter's phone number, saying that she'll text him if she finds anything, just so someone will be around to get her out of a situation. Peter reluctantly agrees, just in case. He knows that she shouldn't be doing this, and he knows that no one's going to be able to stop her, so does it anyway. Spider-Man rarely gives his phone number out to random strangers, but this time, he's afraid that she might get seriously hurt, or worse. Emma leaves, and Peter realizes that he's late for dinner with Aunt May. Peter arrives home as he enters through the front door. He instantly locks eyes with Mary Jane, who is the first one to notice him arrive. Aunt May greets him and says that she's glad that he could make it. MJ asks what took him so long since they both just came from school, and Peter says that the bus got held up in traffic. MJ hums in agreement, but we sense that she doesn't really believe him. They sit down for dinner and start to eat. It's eerily quiet until Anna Watson starts asking Peter about his school life and how he's doing. Peter says that everything's going well, and MJ says that sometimes he doesn't show up for class. Is it really going that well? And Aunt May is surprised by this, and Peter says that sometimes work just gets in the way, and that he has to take photos for the Bugle, just because it's a source of income, and he can't afford to give it up. And right on cue, Emma texts him saying that she found the location of where Fisk is, and that he's at a warehouse near the docks, old auction house that all the underground criminals used to do their bidding in, back in Season 2. Peter sighs as he knows that he has to go. Peter awkwardly stands up and says that he has something that's come up, and that he's really, really sorry. Aunt May is disappointed as she looks down. Anna comforts her by putting her arm around her. Peter says that he'll make it up to them, and in a panic says that they'll all catch a movie together at some point, as he leaves in a hurry. MJ is baffled by Peter's constant disappearances. What is going on with him? Spider-Man arrives on the scene as he swings and lands on top of the auction house. He'll have to be careful. Peter meets Emma outside of the building, saying that she found Fisk. He's in there. Spider-Man says that she needs to leave, and Emma says that she's not leaving. She has to get this final bit for her documentary. Peter starts to become frustrated with her. He raises his voice and says that she doesn't know what the Goblin is capable of. And if it is him, even if it's some foul trick, she won't want to risk it. The Goblin has plagued Peter's life for too long now, and the fun and games are over. This is serious. This needs to end. Emma looks down as she remembers what Peter told her about responsibility in the last episode. Peter enters the building, and tied up to a chair is Wilson Fisk. Fisk looks panicked and rough. He says that he needs to release him, or else they're both going to die. Peter is confused and says that he won't until he tells him what's going on. Fisk says that someone took him, and in response, Peter questions if this entity is to be the Green Goblin. Wilson looks down and says, "No, it's someone different. It's not him." Peter is now perplexed. But before the discourse could continue much further between the two, a diabolical laugh can be heard in the background. And wouldn't you know, revealing himself on a glider in an orange, yellow, and blue costume is none other than the Hobgoblin. Spider-Man, confused, asks, "Who are you?" And the Hobgoblin replies with, "Your worst nightmare," as he throws pumpkin bomb after pumpkin bomb. Spider-Man dodging out of the way, trying not to get hit. How does this keep happening? He thinks to himself. Where are all these goblins coming from? One of the bombs allows Fisk to be released, and they both team up to fight the Hobgoblin. The Hobgoblin had upgraded tech from the Green Goblin. However, parts of the suit still remained green and purple, showing someone had spray painted over the top of it. Peter asks again, "Who the hell are you?" And then the newfound masked man replies, saying that they are the Hobgoblin. The fight attracts the attention of the police, as Captain Stacy starts to make his way over to the scene of the attack. However, caught in the middle of everything is Emma, as she is recording in the corner. Peter spots her. He has to get her out of here. She's gonna get seriously hurt. Peter rushes over to her. But just before he could get there, a pumpkin bomb blows up in close proximity to her. Peter shouts no as he runs over to her. Meanwhile, Fisk is fighting the Hobgoblin on his own, trying to dismantle him from his glider. He shouts over to Spider-Man, saying that he needs some help over here. Peter places Emma to one side, who is still breathing and enraged, fuels his anger towards the Hobgoblin as he battles intensely. Both of them become too much for Hobgoblin, as he uses his glider to escape into the night. And just as he escapes, Fisk and Peter turn back to look at each other. Fisk says that they should work together more often. If he just joined him, they would be an unstoppable force, just as they were tonight against the Hobgoblin. Spider-Man says that he'd never join him. Fisk says so be it. Let's finish this then. Peter says with pleasure, as they engage in battle. Peter used a battle-damaged Wilson Fisk to his advantage, using his agility and increased stamina to hop around him. Eventually, Captain Stacy reaches the scene, and Kingpin is cornered. Wilson Fisk is finally arrested. We cut to after the battle had happened, and Captain Stacy and Spider-Man stand face to face as Emma is being lifted into the back of an ambulance. Stacy asks if he knows her, and he says he does. She wouldn't listen to him and stay out of all of this. She wanted footage for a documentary film, Peter tells Stacy. Stacy sighs and says things that people will do nowadays for a viral video. Stacy also says that Peter needs to repair his suit. Soon people will be able to tell who's underneath. Spider-Man shrugs and says that he'll catch him later. Peter leaves, leaving Captain Stacy to clear up the mess. We come to the end of the episode when Peter sneaks back into the house and Aunt May catches him. She says that she's disappointed in him and all she wanted was to spend some time with her nephew, the boy that she raised. She feels like he's slipping away from her. Peter says that he's sorry, and Aunt May says that he can apologize by coming to the movies with them three next week. She says that they are going to take him up on that offer. Peter asks how they're going to afford it, and May says that Anna Watson has offered to pay for them. Peter says that's nice, as he makes his way upstairs. We get a closing narration from Peter, saying that he needs to try harder, but there's one last thing that he needs to take care of, and that's Hobgoblin. Whoever he is, wherever he is, Spider-Man won't rest until he's behind bars. Episode 13, Responsibility. We start our episode and Peter is upstairs asleep. It's a Saturday, so no school today. Peter gets to sleep in today until Aunt May knocks on the door saying Peter's name. It's 1 PM in the afternoon. Peter jolts out of bed saying he's coming. Peter comes downstairs and asks about breakfast. Aunt May laughs, saying that he missed breakfast ages ago. Peter's eyes widen. The black circles underneath them could be seen clearly. He was exhausted. With everything happening around him, Peter found it hard to sleep. And even when he did, he'd just dream of the same face over and over again. The Goblin. Whether it was purple and green, or yellow and orange, it would always be him. It always was him. Peter was determined to find the truth. Aunt May then reminds him that they're catching a movie with MJ and Anna Watson today. Peter forgot, as May says that they're leaving in 15 minutes, which is why she woke him up. Peter scrambles to get ready. We cut to a scene with Wilson Fisk, as he's been loaded off at Rikers Island, back from seasons 1 and 2, where all the supervillains would be held. Fisk accepts that this is his fate. He lost. His empire is gone. He has to regain his power by establishing himself as the top dog throughout Rikers first, if he is to return to the top once again. We then cut on to later in the episode when Peter is out with May, Anna Watson, and Mary Jane. They all catch a movie together and it is relatively normal. I want to use this time, which would probably be a good 3 to 5 minutes of the episode, exploring how well MJ and Peter work together. We've never really seen them interact apart from in school or with other people around. This will take time to explore how good their chemistry is together and how well they will get along. For a moment, Peter will forget everything instead of constantly thinking about Fisk, the Goblin, Harry. He will just be Peter Parker, something that he hasn't been able to do for such a long time. This will be the feeling that only Gwen has ever given him before, the ability to forget. We also see it in MJ's eyes as well. That's something that she was holding on to in the last episodes. Those hints that there was a little something more to her character evaporates when she's with Peter, when she's spending time with the boy next door. Peter allows her to become who she really wants to be. She's almost a different person to the cool and perfect girl we have come accustomed to. Once the movie is up, Peter and the rest of them will make their way outside, when Peter sees helicopters flying above him. This can't be good. Instantly, he snaps back into reality. Spider-Man is needed, and he's needed quickly. Whatever it is, it can't be good. Peter says that he has enjoyed his time out, but he says he really needs to go, desperately. There is something that he needs to take care of. This takes MJ back a bit. It's becoming quite annoying as much as it is mysterious. So this time, whilst May and Anna go off into the markets as Peter leaves, MJ follows him and decides that she will find out for herself why Peter Parker is so mysterious. Peter is getting changed into a Spider-Man costume in an alleyway, and MJ sees this from afar. She doesn't reveal herself though, as she stays hidden. But to her surprise, Peter Parker is Spider-Man, as he slips down his mask and web swings away. MJ couldn't believe it. But it sort of made so much sense to her. Peter Parker is Spider-Man. She will think this over in her head, over and over again. That annoyed feeling within her would subside to sympathy and almost sadness as she realizes what Peter puts himself through every time someone is in danger. His selflessness comes across as selfishness, but he can't tell anyone that. As to not panic May, as to not panic her, or any of his friends, because Peter has a responsibility as Spider-Man. She sees that now. As MJ contemplates what she has just seen, Spider-Man swings away heroically as he follows the helicopters. Something inside Peter tells him that this is the Goblin. Hob or Green, this is the end of it all. The helicopters start to travel over to the prison island, Rikers, as Peter watches on. Explosions can be seen off in the distance. Peter thwips a web towards one of the helicopters as he attaches himself to it. He crawls along the side to see Captain Stacy was also aboard the same helicopter. He hops in and talks to the captain. Stacy briefs Peter into what is happening, and that all units are to converge on Rikers Island. It's major. The Hobgoblin is attacking the prison, and all the supervillains are escaping. Peter gulps. He'd only ever dealt with the Sinister Six before, but all of his villains at once? That was something else. We cut to Rikers as Hobgoblin attacks. We soon learn that the Hobgoblin is still going after Wilson Fisk, no matter what. Apparently, him being in prison wasn't enough for him. He wants him dead. Spider-Man makes his way onto the scene. I imagine this battle taking up a majority of the episode. It will be legendary, with most of his villains over the 3 seasons returning to battle him in some capacity. The police force and even the military will be put out in action trying to help Spider-Man defeat all the villains. He'll come across Rhino, Montana, Puma, Kraven, and many more. He fights his way through them as he tries to make his way to the Hobgoblin, as he is looking for Fisk. Once he reaches him, Spider-Man will ask why is he doing this, and the Hobgoblin will say that he wants Fisk dead, because he is the type of man that if you don't kill him, he will keep coming back and back again. He needs to die for the greater good. Not just for him, but for Spider-Man too. Peter starts to listen. The Hobgoblin goes on to talk about the fact that Fisk will make his life a living hell, because soon he will be out of this place and back ruling New York. That's just the type of person he is, and it's only a matter of time. Spider-Man says that killing is never the answer, no matter what, because with great power also comes great responsibility, and that's an oath that Spider-Man has always lived by. Spider-Man and the Hobgoblin clash, not just physically, but morally too, as they engage in battle. Pumpkin bombs flying everywhere. This is Spider-Man's greatest fight yet. His suit torn and ripped from the season gone by, representing his mental state slowly disintegrating. But he must fight on, because no matter what, he always has to get back up again. The battle rages on, until Spider-Man finally defeats him and all the other villains. The police start to regain control of the prison again. But one last thing, Spider-Man must find out who the Hobgoblin is. He pulls his mask off to reveal none other than Donald Mencken underneath. It turns out that after his kidnapping by Fisk from earlier in the season, Mencken had decided that enough was enough, and Fisk was to die. Without Oscorp, without his job, he was a nobody, so decided he was going to take back what was rightfully his. He would stop at nothing until Fisk was dead. He found an undercover prototype suit of the Goblin and decided to use it as his own and spray paint it in his own colours. He also decided to use some prototype tech that he also had access to, since he once worked at Oscorp, and thus the Hobgoblin was born and went on to fail. Peter was surprised as anyone. He fully expected Harry or even an undead Norman Osborn to be under the mask, but no, it was Mencken. After this, Captain Stacy will arrive on the scene. Peter will fall to his knees. He's absolutely exhausted. But the battle is won. The battle is over. Captain Stacy reminds Peter that he can see his face, as his mask is torn more than ever. He says he needs to get out of here, but he says thank you. He couldn't have done any of this without him. Peter nods and swings away, leaving the police to arrest Mencken. And in a gracious and relentless final battle, the Goblin is gone forever. We cut to a week later. Everything is going smoothly. Peter looks a bit happier, but MJ looks on as he traverses the hallways at Midtown. She knows his secret and looks rather empathetic about it. Later that night, Peter is chilling in his room, relaxed. He hadn't felt this way in a long time. His phone rings. He picks it up. It's Gwen. She says that Harry is going to Europe to recover. Apparently his mother is sending him away. After all the abuse and all the stress put through Harry Osborn this season, he's finally going away to recover. Peter is confused though. What about the Goblin charges? Gwen says that she doesn't know either, but apparently all his charges have been dropped for an unknown reason. They don't know why. Peter says that's confusing. The call goes silent though for a second, after the conversation dips. Peter says, does that mean that they can finally be together? And Gwen says, yeah, she thinks they can. Peter smiles as he says he'll be over soon, but there's just one more stop he needs to make first. We cut to the hospital. Peter visits Emma Edwards, who was caught in the crossfire of the Hobgoblin and Fisk battle at the docks. As Peter arrives, the doctors tell him something very upsetting and very unfortunate. Emma has entered a coma, and there's nothing they can really do about it. Her parents are flying over from California to see her. Peter accepts this, but internally grieves, as he knows it's partially his fault to what happened to her. He can't believe it. Further proving what knowing Peter's secret can do to people. Peter speaks to her. He says that her knowing his identity kinda helps him. He can be honest. But seeing what happened to her, he wouldn't want to happen to anyone else. No one else can know he's Spider-Man. Never. He speaks to her, telling her that his Uncle Ben always taught him about great responsibility, and he feels a great deal of it standing there. Feeling down, knowing that Emma's future may not exist, he leaves for Gwen's house. We get a montage of Peter making his way over there. He buys flowers on the way with some of the remaining money he has left from the bugle. We can see it in Peter's face though, that he's unsure, thinking to himself over and over again about what he just saw with Emma. Peter makes it to Gwen's house, and all the lights are on. He notices through the window Gwen and Captain Stacy laughing with each other as they talk about their days. Peter's eyes widen. He never even realized. It's George Stacy. Captain Stacy. The same Captain Stacy that knows his identity. He can't let George see him here, not after he knows that he's Spider-Man. He never even considered that. Peter starts to overthink. He can't let what happened to Emma happen to Gwen either. Emma got caught in the crossfire because she knew who Peter was. His identity will always be a big part of who he is. And if Gwen was too close to him, the same thing could happen to her. A tear rolls down Peter's cheek as he knows he's right. Once again, the responsibility of Spider-Man interferes with the happiness of Peter Parker. Peter bends down and leaves the flowers on the front porch. At this point, another tear rolls down his cheek again. Peter steps away and leaves. He knows it's not right. The best thing for Gwen is for her to be safe. And with Captain Stacy knowing his identity, it's already dangerous enough. He can't lose Gwen. He could never lose Gwen. Which means he can't be with her. Not as Peter Parker. Not as Spider-Man. And thus, we conclude our story. But wait! There is more! One last scene to finish off the season. Donald Mencken has a visitor in prison. A man who goes by the name of Gabriel Lyman. He has blonde hair and a bright blonde mustache to go along with it. He wore glasses to cover his eyes that carried much baggage. He sat down opposite Mencken in a visiting room, Mencken confused at who this man is. The man says to him that Mencken will take all the fall for all of the Goblin's crimes, including the Green Goblin's too. Mencken says, "Excuse me?" And then the man repeats himself, saying that he will take the fall for all of the Goblin's crimes, in a very threatening manner. Mencken says, who even is he? And the Goblin was Harry Osborn, it has nothing to do with him. And then Gabrielle holds up a picture of Mencken's family, stating that it does now. Mencken gulps, and reluctantly has to agree, and thus his confession means that all the charges against Harry Osborn are dropped, letting him free. Mencken says that he won't get away with this, and the man says, oh, but he will. Not only will he get away with it, but he won't even get an apology out of him, because there's one thing, Gabrielle Lyman never apologizes. That is it for Spectacular Spider-Man Season 3. If you did enjoy the season, make sure to hit that like button and make sure to subscribe for Season 4 because it's going to be coming very, very soon. I'm currently in the process of writing it. It will probably start coming out next month or so whilst I get most of the episodes down and written so they can come out weekly. But with that being said, subscribe, like the video, make sure to share it around, tell me what you think will happen in Season 4, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Take care, and peace.